Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. We'll start the evening with Councillor Grossman leading us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please be aware that this meeting is both being audio and video recorded. And in accordance with our new rules, I have to say who is online. So online we have Vice President Lipoff, Councilors Kalis, Noel, Norton, and Wright, and everyone else is in the room. So for first call, the first is Vice President Lipoff for the Land Use Committee.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The report starts on page 517. The first item is on second call. 31523 is on second call. 262-23, Robert and Laura K. Hughes, request to waive the separation requirement for a historic detached accessory apartment to further extend non-conforming height and footprint and to exceed FAR at 193 Lake Avenue, approved 7-0. 309-23, Ryan McAllister, request to extend FAR at 93 Ruane Road, approved 6-0. 310-23, Larry Smith, request to allow parking in the front setback at 70 Kingswood Road, approved 6-0. 312-23, Lancaster Management LLC, request to allow two-story building on an undersized MAN lot at 0 Rumford Ave, approved 6-0. 313-23, Walcott Corporation, request to add 48 patio seats and remove 8 parking stalls and to amend special permit 172-98 parens 2 at 9-13 Kenneth Street, 29 Kenneth Street, 118 Needham Street, and 122 Needham Street, approved 407. And I will move the report. I do have one public hearing to assign.
Please go ahead.
Okay, we have an extension of time to exercise a special permit at 327-23 Andrea Roman. That's an extension that will be coming up. But the public hearing is 328-23 Green Real Estate RE West Newton LLC. Request to amend special permit 67-20 to allow a medical marijuana treatment center at 1089 Washington Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crossley for the Zoning and Planning Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Items around zoning were held, of course, but I would like to urge my colleagues to take a close look at the report to see what other amendments we made in committee at our last meeting. And we got pretty far along with some pretty clear additional work that we need to do. It looks like we can be voting the item out of committee October 23rd. If, however, you have any either questions, please contact the planning department with any questions, or me if there are procedural questions. And if you think you have any amendments that you want to have taken up in committee, instead of in the full council, please let us know. The committee has agreed to submit their amendments to the clerk so that they go in the Friday pack and we can all see what our work is going to be for the 23rd. So we would all appreciate your doing that. In addition, so both of those items were held. On page 520, item 205-23, I'd like to reassign a public hearing.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is the petition to rezone lots on Charles Street. If you might remember, we already held a public hearing in zoning and planning, but the item came to the council, was sent back to committee so that the Ward 4 councilors could hold a community meeting. They did so. There are a couple of people I understand who would like to speak, but we kind of have had our hands full, so we have would like to, and we're going to run out of time as the clock runs. So in order to officially hear from folks, we'd like to set this public hearing for November 13th. Okay, and that concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Noel is giving the report for programs and services.
Thank you, Madam President. The report begins on page 520. Items number 411-22 and items number 412-22. Request for amendment to Chapter 21, Article 3, trees to extend tree protection and update permits, as well as request for review and amendments to Chapter 21, Article 3, Division 3. So these items have been our agenda for several evenings. We've had a public hearing, and we are now in the final stages. At our meeting, we voted on the final content for this docket item. And at this point, it's in the hands of our law department to check it for language. And the idea is that it will be again on programs and services agenda the beginning of November, at which point we will vote it out.
Okay, thank you very much. The next is Councillor Downs for Public Safety and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam President. The report begins on page 521. Number 14823, discussion regarding the security measures and any incidents during the 2023 Boston Marathon was voted unanimously. No action necessary, 7-0. We did hear from Hattie Kerwin-Derrick about measures the BAA and the clubs were taking and meetings with Chief Carmichael and the mayor, which are ongoing. And the second item is on second call.
Thank you very
I move
much.
the report.
Thank you. Councillor Leary for the Public Facilities Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. The report begins on page 521. Although the first item was held, second item was held. 322-23 was a request for a grant of location in Ward Street, and this was to install and maintain gas main in Ward Street throughout Center, Loring, Sumner, Ballard, Ashford, and Ward 7 folks have been waiting a long time for that to finish, so we wanted to vote that out. So Public Facilities approved that, 7-0. All other items were held. Yep. And I just have one late filed item that I would like to request a suspension of the rules for.
Okay, do you want to tell us what the item is?
Yes, this is item 334-23. Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to transfer and expend the sum of $300,000 from a reserve funds and budget reserve accounts to complete the Phase 3 Gath Memorial Pool renovation, including the FF&E contingency.
Okay. Councillor Leary is looking for a suspension of the rules to accept a late filed item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Grossman for the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. The report begins on page 523. The committee met on Tuesday, October 10th. The first item, 306-23, is on second call. The second item, 325-23, the request to transfer $50,000 from the Water Services Connections full-time wages account in order to settle workers' compensation claim, was approved by the committee 8-0. With that, I move the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Laredo for Real Property Reuse Committee.
There is no report this evening, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Before we have the roll call on the first call items, I'd like to have a moment of silence. The councils put out a statement, and all of us signed on to it in support of Israel. But I think the moment of silence is for all those people who are grieving for those who are killed, those who are hostages, and those who are dying in the Middle East right now. So I'd like us to have a moment of silence. Thank you very much. And now we can call the roll.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bowman.
Aye.
Counselor Crossley.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg. Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman. Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz.
Aye.
Counselor Noel.
Aye.
Norton. Counselor Norton.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Albright.
Aye.
Motion carries 23 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent.
Thank you. So now we have several second call items, and I would like to ask your indulgence to take them up in a different order from the way they're listed here. First of all, we have a land use item, and I'd like that one to go first. Counselor Downs had to go home, so we'll take her item up second, and hopefully she'll get there before we need to take up the item. We may need to take a short break. But, so Councilor, Vice President Lipoff, would you like to do the first item, which is 315-23?
Sure. 315-23 Crafts Development LLC and SRG Holdco Investments LLC. Request for extension of time to exercise special permit 260-22 at 34, 36, 38, 48, 50 Craft Street and 19-21 Court Street. This is the elderly housing property that we approved on Craft Street, and the developer, the petitioner, who due to a combination of many things, including rising rates and rising costs of construction, have stalled and need a little extra time. The law states that they can have a maximum of 3 years. They're coming up on the 1 year and they're asking for the other 2. We did pass it in committee 501 with Councilor Laredo abstaining, who asked for a 1 year instead of 2 year. And that's why he has put it on second call, and I'll let him speak to it.
So Councilor Laredo, you put this on second call.
Madam President and colleagues, I did put this on second call, and I put this on second call because I don't want to have a lengthy discussion over this. I fully expect this to pass, but I really want to go on record to express my concern as to what's going on here. Let me just try to give you a little bit of backdrop and then explain why I have such serious concerns, and we all ought to be having some serious concerns. We routinely in this Land Use Committee and in this council grant extensions, as we should. Somebody comes in, there's a reason they're not able to do something in time, there's pandemic, something's happened in their personal life, if it's a residence, there's some other reason, valid reason, for granting often a 2-year extension. And again, we do that routinely. Here's my problem with this project. We are now, as a city, have a developer, and I'm not faulting the developer. I don't know why this developer can't get this project done earlier. Of course, we know what's going on with construction costs, not only locally, but nationally, but none of us are privy to this developer's finances, nor frankly should we be. But this same developer has multiple projects which are now, in the case of Riverside, empty. In the case of Dunstan East, which is in the process of getting sold, a hole in the ground, projects that we approved in West Newton Square. And I, for one, am very concerned with just granting an automatic blanket 2-year extension. And that's why I called for a 1-year extension. Yes, give this developer some time. This is a good project, colleagues. I voted for it. If I recall correctly, virtually everyone else, if not everyone else in the council, or most of us, voted for it. No project's perfect, but this is a good project, which is why I voted for it. But I am not okay with letting this sit fallow for 2 more years based on some unspecified, we're having some difficulties, give us more time. I think that's actually a huge disservice to the city to do that. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to give an extension of 1 year and demand that this developer come back at the end of that year. And if they need more time and there's a valid reason for it, and it actually looks like they're going to go forward, then of course we'd grant the extension. But right now, I don't have that assurance. And I think we all should share the concern of what happens when we have a single developer in the city who's doing multiple projects. And again, it's not our job, nor do I want to inquire about their finances or their situation. But I am concerned of just the city council sitting back and doing nothing and letting the project lie fallow for 2 years without any oversight. I don't think that's good public policy. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam President. And again, colleagues, I'm not looking for a lengthy debate on this. I fully expect, as it did in committee, that it's going to pass here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan and then Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I was the only vote against it. There might have been 2, and I'll continue to vote against anything to do with this project. I think we can do better. I think we can, we have the Sunrise development down the street with all the back and forth on village centers and trying to see what's best for Northampton Village. I'd rather see housing there with affordable units. I think it would work better now that we've decided on our heights and sizes. I think BC2 would work nice there. Beside the Whole Foods, we're able to do shopping. So I will continue, and I don't want to see another hole in the ground for another 2 to 3 years. So it's my right to vote against it for any reason, and I will just continue to vote against this. We can do better. We need housing, not another high-priced nursing home. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Madam President, through you to the chair, and I have a procedural question as well as a substantive question. The procedural one is, what is the vote necessary needed in order to affect this? Do you need a 2/3 vote, as I understand it, because this is an extension, and so it's treated the same as a regular petition? Is that correct?
Vice President Lipoff, do you have an answer?
You know, I've never had one of these questioned. They've always gone right through, so I don't know whether it's 2/3 or simple majority. I would ask the clerk.
We will let's take a brief break, because I know that...
Well, before you do, can I ask my other question?
Yes, well, just 1 second, Councillor Baker.
Yeah.
So are you being in touch with Mr. Temple? Yes, okay.
My best memory from conversations with former Associate City Solicitor Weedy Young a number of years ago, that if you're dealing with a matter that involves a 16 vote to pass, if you're doing something significant for it, you have to have the same supermajority in order to act. If this was a matter that passed by a simple majority because of the new rules, perhaps that will qualify for that too. So I don't know the answer to that under the current rules. That's why I wanted to clarify it. But the substantive question, I have great sympathy for the point of view expressed by my colleague from Ward 7. I'm not sure why we should grant an automatic 2-year as opposed to a 1-year with an opportunity to come back, as he so indicated. And if he were willing to move an amendment to that effect, I would be glad to support it. I don't know if that amendment was offered in committee, and if it wasn't and did not get a chance to get heard, it certainly could be heard here. And I think given all the uncertainties that we've heard about, it's wiser to do that and let this project have a 1-year extension and then return. So that's a question through you to the maker of the motion.
May I make the motion then, Madam President?
Please go ahead.
I'll make the motion to substitute 2 years for 1-year
I
extension.
mean, you 1 year for 2 years, don't you think?
Substitute 1 year for 2 years. Thank you, my colleague from Ward 7.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker, you did ask the question if that was brought up in committee. It was, and it failed at the time in the committee.
Okay, so it is appropriate to at least consider it on the council floor, as I understand it.
Sure.
Okay.
So, Councillor Baker, the answer to your question
Yes.
is simple majority. It
Okay.
only requires a simple majority.
But an amendment for this purpose could require only a simple majority of those present and voting, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if that amendment passes, then if the amended version is before us, it just needs a simple majority to take effect. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Leary.
Thank you, Madam President. I would support such an amendment for 1 year because, you know, I think it is good to check in with the developer. And I think that's the intent of your amendment, Councilor Laredo, rather than let it go for 2 years. But I will remind my colleagues that it is a very difficult time for construction, expenses going way up. Even New Cal has been delayed due to expenses to wait for a more favorable time to do the work. So I would think that's the reason why they're asking for a 2-year extension, but I think it's very well and good to check in before that with the developer in 1 year. Thank you.
Councillor Crosley, did you have your hand up?
Thank you. So I think this question was answered, but I want to ask it clearly anyway, through you to the chair. So you did discuss the virtues of 1 year versus 2 year in committee. Did the petitioner help to inform that question? And I'll go back and preface my question with, at the Chamber Real Estate Conference, we heard recently, from people out there who are saying it's likely going to take a good 18 months for the construction industry to settle, barring any other major events, which we hope do not happen to our world. So what was discussed in committee that helped you to decide to go with 2 years versus 1 year? Because on the surface, it does sound like a reasonable thing to check in, but I would just like to hear more information.
Vice President Lipoff, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, quite simply, they were asking for it for the same reasons that you just spoke of. My day job is real estate, and you know, I have a lot of people, a lot of friends, a lot of people I know with projects stalled, and we've got one here in the city. Councillor Leary took that right out of my mouth. Everybody's having trouble because when you design a project, you've got a pro forma, and when the expenses go through the roof, the numbers don't work anymore. We spent a lot of time reviewing and approving this project as well as some others that are stalled. And I'm just trying to be good to our customers here, who do business with the city and with the land use committee. And we worked together to find a way to get to approvals, and we did it here. And so I'll put my hand down now and continue to speak. Is it unreasonable for us to have them come in a year? Absolutely not. Would I care to? Would I not want that? I think it's fine. I just know that this is not going to be a year. I know it's going to be 18 months to 2 years. Till the ship has been righted. And I just think that with a law allowing them to go 3 years, this 2 year is reasonable. It's not earth shattering if people want to do 1 year and bring them in and just hear that things aren't great yet. Now, let's say things turn around and they put a shovel in the ground in 10 months. Well, then they don't need to come in at all. I'm going to leave this to the will of the council. I think 2 years is fine. I wouldn't be upset if it was the one. This really shouldn't take much more time tonight.
Thank you. Councilor Crosley, were you finished? Okay, thank you. And Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Madam President. I voted for this. I voted for this project in committee. I voted for it on the full council. I voted for the 1 year extension of time for this project last week, and I will vote for it again on the floor of the council tonight for 1 year.
Thank you. Councilor Markowitz and then Councilor Krinsman.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. I also voted for this project in committee and believe it's a good project, but I'm going to associate myself with the comments that Councilor Leary said. I think it just makes sense. We all know it's probably going to take more than a year, but I think as a matter of practice, it's good for us to check in and do this. So we're kind of setting a bit of a standard here, and I think we should do that. Thank you.
Councilor Krinsman.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm very sorry. I'm late, so I assume we are talking about repealing the parking ban, and what's on the floor is potentially repealing the parking ban for 1 year. Is that right?
Very funny, Councilor Krinsman.
I'm 100% serious. That's what we're talking about, right?
No, we are not. We're actually doing a land use item, Councilor Krinsman.
Oh, okay.
So
I apologize. My hand is down.
Okay. Councilor Bowman.
Thank you. I supported this project in committee initially, voted for it on the full council, and I did not support a 1 year look back and only a 1 year extension. I think a 2 year extension is quite reasonable given the state of lending and the cost of construction. And what I would ask my colleagues who, and maybe through you to the chair of land use is, what would happen if we granted a 1 year extension and a year they needed an extension and people weren't willing to grant it? And would this somehow, do we really think that by granting them only a 1 year extension, that this is somehow going to motivate them to move faster? I think they're going to move as fast as they can, but do I have a concern that if we only granted them a 1 year extension and they were concerned that they would not get a 2nd year extension, that they would begin to think about not doing this project? This is a good project. This project has many great benefits to the city. And while it may not have affordable housing units in it, we do have a very large, substantial, I believe it's an $11 million payment to affordable housing in Newton that will be better utilized by the Affordable Housing Trust and to support the Newton Housing Authority. So in addition to many other things, and if it were to be rezoned VC2 or VC3, it will be a smaller project than what's here. This will be a special permit. I just looked it up, it's 111,000 square feet. This is a big project. So if we're looking to get something done quickly, it seems to me that if we had to go through another special permit process with a different developer on a different project, we're still looking, our special permit process is anything but nimble. So, and I don't think anybody is looking to, has the funds unless they're self-funded, which is the issue with this developer, is they're looking for the capital markets to fund them, that they're prepared to do something. So I think this is a good project. We spent a lot of time negotiating it, and I do believe it will go forward once the financing is there. So I would encourage my colleagues to think about that. And if anybody wants to weigh in on the whether a 1 year might scare away the developer from doing a project at all, if they felt that they might be concerned in a year that we wouldn't give them an additional extension if the markets haven't turned around, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
We don't have a crystal ball, and I don't think it's going to scare anybody away. I think that it'll come to us in a year, and I think what Councilor Laredo was looking for is to have them give us an update and an explanation. in a year instead of giving them the full 2. I mean, that's really the difference here, people. Knowing the markets and what I think this is going to take, although I don't have a crystal ball, but the prognosticators are saying it's going to be at least 18 months or more. And that's why I thought the 2 years was reasonable. We have never not granted an extension of time. So if they come in a year, could we shoot it down and say, no, we're not giving you the extension? We could. I don't understand why we would, for all the same reasons Councilor Bowman just talked about, starting the process all over again and what that means. And we the $11 million towards affordable housing. I mean, there's a lot of good things about this project. So it would be a check-in my mind. And I think the handicapping on granting it to them would be quite high, because I've never seen us not allow a developer extra time.
Councilor Laredo?
I'll try to be brief here. The folks I'm worried about are the residents of this city. They're my customers. And I want to be really clear that we have an oversight function here as a city council to make sure that things are going smoothly. If this developer decides that they're never going to be able to build a project, I want to know that now so they can go find somebody else to do the project or do another project here. I think it's quite prudent. I think the chair is right. It's a philosophical issue. If they come back in 10 months and they say, here's where we are and we think we're going forward, of course I'm going to vote for it. But if they come back in 10 months and they have absolutely no plan or no idea whether they're going to do it, then why would that be in the public interest to just give them more time and have more wait and more delay? So I really don't think this is going to be at all harmful to the developer. I think this is in the public interest. And I'll remind everyone, yes, we know construction costs are up. We're all aware of it. None of us in this room or online have any idea what is actually going on within this particular developer. And that's fine. That's fine. We don't know. So let's be reasonable. Let's give the extension of a year. If they come back in 6 or 9 months and they need more time and there's a plan to do something, then by all means, I'll be the first one to vote in favor of it. Because again, I want this project going through. But we have an obligation to our residents to have oversight, and that's all this is, some extra oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Malachy and then Councilor Ryan.
Thank you. Perhaps I should be happy at the idea of the almost indefinite extension because it's where we're parking the majority of our school buses, but I share Councilor Laredo's concerns about the sort of uncertainty and the unfinished projects of this developer, and I think actually he's being overly generous and not wanting to know the details of what's going on. I wish we did know more details when we're going to be asked to extend this special permit. At the same time, we have the hole in the ground, which is in my ward, Dunstan East. Councilor Wright and I were told in August by Mark Development representatives and the prospective buyer that a transaction would happen in September. We were recently told it's postponed till the end of December. I don't know if it will really happen then. We have the Santander project on hold, and we have Riverside on hold. So it just feels like we're sort of being asked to hold somebody's seat, and they walk away, and we have no idea when they're coming back to reclaim the seat. So I think I will support this substitution of 1 year for 2 years. I think 1 year is actually generous. Thank you.
Madam President, I call the question.
Okay. Is there any objection to that? Pardon? So Councilor Ryan would like to speak. So we'll have to have a vote on the motion to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
No. Wow. Know who your friends are.
That wasn't the majority. It did not. It didn't.
I think we should give colleagues the chance to speak.
We just voted. Sorry, that's the procedure. Sorry, Councilor Ryan. Councilor Vice President Lipoff has called the question, so we'll call the roll. Now we're voting on Councilor Laredo's amendment to substitute 1 year for 2 years. Yes.
Madam President, to be clear, a yes vote is in favor of the 1 year substitution on the amendment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bowman.
No.
Counselor Crossley.
No.
Counselor Danberg.
No.
Counselor Downs.
No.
Counselor Gentile. Aye. Counselor Greenberg.
No.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey. Counselor Kalis.
No.
Counselor Kelly.
No.
Counselor Krinsman. Counselor Krinsman? Okay.
Come back to him.
We'll come back to him. I'll try that later. Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
No.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz.
Aye.
Counselor Noel.
No.
Counselor Norton.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
I apologize. I joined late. I don't feel informed enough to vote.
So you're stepping outside the rail.
I'm stepping out. That's one way to say it. I could have said that. Sorry. I'm stepping. Look at me. I'm stepping outside the rails.
Thank you. President Albright.
No.
Motion carries 12 yeas, 11 nays, 1 absent or outside the rail.
Okay. Very good. Now we can move on to the next item, and I believe Oh, yes, we have to vote for the main item. Thank you very much, Councilor Lucas, to save me twice tonight. So now we have to call the roll on the main item.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bowman.
Aye.
Counselor Crossley.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile. Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz.
Aye.
Counselor Noel.
Aye.
Counselor Norton.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Ryan.
Abstain.
Step outside the rail.
Yeah, you can't abstain in council.
I step outside the rail.
Thank you. Thank you. Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Albright.
Aye.
Motion carries 23 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, takes care of the first item. The next item is going to be dealt with by Councilor Downs, and that will be 319-23. Would you give the report?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. And my apologies that I cannot be there in person for the later part of the meeting, for this part of the meeting. Item 319-23 was a petition to request to repeal the overnight winter parking ban. Jeremy Freudberg et al. Petition to amend Motor Vehicles and Traffic Ordinance, Chapter 19, Section 174B of the City of Newton Ordinances, deletion of other vehicles from December 1st through March 31st. It shall be unlawful for any vehicle other than one acting in an emergency to be parked on any street, way, highway, road, parkway, or private way dedicated or open to the use of the public for a period of time longer than 1 hour between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. as appearing in section 19-174 in the revised ordinances of 2017 as amended. The committee had a spirited discussion with Mr. Freudberg and also with our colleagues, those who could get away from their other meetings that night. We received 40 emails to repeal the overnight winter parking ban before the meeting and 31 to maintain it. We also received other emails, and my colleagues and I have since had many more emails on this. We discussed also a possible 2-year trial suspension, which also failed, but the committee voted unanimously. Let me just double check that. I believe it was 7-0 to 0-7 against the initiative petition. And we also rejected the appeal 2-5. Tonight, so one of the reasons we took this up so early is under our charter, we have to take action before November 1st. Otherwise, the initiative petition fails. And my understanding is that signatures are being collected, and this would be a binding initiative on the 2025 ballot if the petitioners are successful in obtaining the remaining roughly 2,500 voter signatures in addition to the roughly 6,000 that they have already collected. It's not a high bar. Tonight we have 3 options. Do you want me to get into those?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have 3 options. A counselor can make a motion to approve the committee recommendation, which is to reject the petition and reject the initiative measure. That's one option. We can, a counselor can move to approve the petitioner initiative. That's the second option. And then 20 days from today, the overnight parking ban would be gone. Or a counselor can motion to submit in lieu of the initiative measure some other motion with a trial period or another possibility. And that's my report.
Okay, so those 3 choices that Councillor Downs just reiterated to us come straight out of our charter. Councillor Baker, yes.
Madam President, just to clarify, though the matter is before the council, we would vote if we in favor of the committee report, which is denial. Is there going to be, I just want to be clear that
yeah, so let me explain. The problem was that the clarity of the choices that the council has was not really clear. It was not made clear at the committee level. So there were some votes taken that indicated the preference of the committee, but they were not really done in the format that we needed. So I think we are accepting their recommendation and moving now to the actual format that we have to take for the charter.
Right, but I think my understanding is that unless there is the report of the committee is that the petition be rejected. And that is, so if we're supporting the report of the committee, and that's the motion that's currently before the council, because that's all that's before us. Nothing else is passed in committee. This is effectively what's before us, that if someone wishes to approve the initiative petition, they would have to move to substitute
That's right.
That for the committee report.
That's right.
But if there is no such motion and the council will go ahead, a yes vote is to approve the committee report,
Yes.
which denies the initiative petition. right? So I just want to be very clear about that because this can get a little complicated in everybody's mind. I don't think, with all respect to the chair, that it is easy for the council itself to do anything other than accept or reject the idea of a trial or anything else. I do not see that a clear option before us, but I want to be,
I believe there could be motions from the counselors, and I believe we will hear some motions from counselors to substitute in lieu of motions instead of rejection.
There may be, and it may be that there is a motion to amend the committee report
Yes.
to substitute some other form of action.
Yes.
I just want to be clear that the committee report at the moment is to say that the parking ban recommendation for the initiative to repeal it is denied.
Yes.
Okay?
So as the evening wears along and there will be motions made, I trust that you will keep us on the straight and narrow.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'll at least try and understand what we're doing. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kelly, you put this on second call.
Point of order.
Yes.
First, Madam
Yes.
President. I'm looking at the charter myself right now, and I see that we have two options. We accept, three options, forgive me. We accept, we reject, or we pass something in lieu of the proposal.
That's correct. That's what Councillor Downs just...
If I could, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If we pass something in lieu of the proposal, that means that this initiative petition essentially has been approved and the initiative petition goes away. That's how I read that.
I don't...
And I think you ought to pay very close attention to that.
We spent some time speaking with the law department.
I'm going to suggest that the clerk with you take a couple minutes now, with all due respect, and go through that, because it's pretty clear about that.
Section 10.7, is that what you're looking at?
Exactly what I'm looking at, Madam
Okay.
Clerk.
So just to read the passage, within 30 days after an initiative petition is presented to the City Council shall act with respect to the initiative measure by passing it without change, by rejecting it, or by passing some other measure stated to be in lieu of the initiative measure. The next sentence is the passage of a measure in lieu of an initiative measure shall be deemed a rejection of the initiative measure. If the City Council fails to act with respect to the initiative measure as required by this section within 30 days after presentation, the measure shall be deemed to have been rejected on the 30th day after presentation.
So I think that clarifies my question, Madam Clerk, and I appreciate that clarification. Your read, just so we're very clear, is even passing some other measure, some unknown amendment, whatever we think that is still a rejection of the petition.
That's what it says.
That's correct.
All right. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you for indulging me, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly, you're on.
Thank you, Madam President. I do want to say I appreciate Councillor Baker clarifying for us where we all are, and I agree with your interpretation of that, and I'm glad we took the time to sort out what's before us now. I stand to make a motion to submit in lieu of the initiative measure a 2-year trial. The restriction on overnight parking set forth in the preceding section 19-174B shall be suspended and ineffective for a trial period commencing December 1, 2023, ending March 31, 2025. The suspension of the winter parking ban will expire on March 31, 2025. And then I'm happy to speak to it when you think the time is right, but that's the motion.
Okay, so Councillor Kelly has made a motion in lieu to adopt something in lieu of the petition. So Councillor Kelly, why don't you start us off by speaking to it?
I'd also like to thank the clerk and the law department for helping me figure out how to do this, despite the confusion that the charter presents for some people. As we partly heard from Councillor Downs, the citizens petition put the question of repealing the overnight winter parking ban will not be on the November 2023 ballot, as not enough signatures were collected in time. It will most likely be on the November 2025 ballot, however. As we heard from Chair Downs, the PS&T committee voted not to approve it, nor did they approve the proposed 2-year trial, which is why I'm bringing it back to all of us, because I'd like all 24 of us to have a chance to think about this. I placed it on second call, again, to give you all a chance to weigh in. In between now and the 2025 election, the parking ban could stay on the books but be temporarily suspended. We could then evaluate the effects, gather and assess data on how it works or not in reality, not during COVID, but now during actual life. This will enable us to suggest possible improvements, changes, or exceptions later. I think we need some time to make this work or not work. Whether you support or are opposed to lifting the ban, a 2-year trial period will give us important information on how to proceed by seeing the impacts on safety, particularly plowing and emergency vehicle access, fairness and equity to all residents throughout Newton. It will also inform us all, both the councilors and the voters, on how to vote in 2025. Thank you. I look forward to some discussion on this.
Okay, are there comments? Councillor Bowman?
So I'd like to associate myself with the comments of Councillor Kelly and to ask for a friendly amendment to include in the language for the trial the requirement to gather the data as part of the trial.
Absolutely, I accept that friendly amendment. And if we want, I can list some of the data that we can collect, but I think that's something we can work out later unless people want to hear some of the data that's collectible.
Did you want to hear the data issue?
Okay. And again, I have spoken with police, fire, and DPW commissioners, as well as the mayor's office, to gather approval for city staff to do the collection of data. They will be collecting, they can collect data on tickets that are issued, cars that are towed, where cars are parking now before the winter parking ban and during it, and also vehicles that are purchased during it, because one of the arguments is people may purchase extra cars because they can park for free on the street. So those are 4 pieces of collectible information that the administration is happy to help us collect so that we can evaluate impacts.
Okay. Very good. Next is Councillor Baker.
So again, Madam President, so procedurally, though, as I understand, because of what the clerk has read and what Councilor Laredo has raised, anything other than approval is a rejection, and it gives the opportunity to the petitioners to gather the additional signatures, and it will go on the ballot as a ballot question, right? But what the thrust of the recommendation is effectively to grant with a sunset provision, as I hear it, and I do think that the rules should require us to have the language of the amendment in its final form in writing for us to consider, and I assume the clerk can generate that, so I won't worry about the language at the moment, but just talk about the policy. But the policy that is being proposed through a trial is basically to repeal the parking ban by the action of the council without an affirmative vote of the committee or the explicit design of the trial and how it is going to work. It's being done on the floor of the board in response to this item. I think that's not a wise way to proceed. I also, as a substantive matter, I'm not in favor of repealing the parking ban. It was indicated that is my reasons in the committee. So I'm going to oppose the amendment, but I also think this is not the sort of thing that should be done in the full council in this context. It is a very complicated issue. If there is indeed sentiment, we deny the petition, that there's some version of the parking ban amendment that we should consider. We should certainly consider those and go through the general process of doing that and have an opportunity to do that as well. I'm not at all confident in the representation by the law department that anything the council does except in response to this ban would be vulnerable to the opportunity to repeal it if the petitioners got additional signatures. That to me is not at all clear. It seems to me the council always has the opportunity to choose to take action on any matter before it in the interim period of time. The parking ban that is the subject of this particular provision is the language in the ordinance now. If there is a language in the ordinance that is amended at some future time, I don't see the council being foreclosed from doing that. And therefore, I think this is both procedurally and substantively unwise, and I urge the council to oppose the item.
Thank you very much. Counselor, was there? Yeah, I guess Counselor Laredo's next. Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Laredo. It's Counselor Kalis who's next. Counselor Kalis and then Counselor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam President. Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I happen to agree here with Counselor Baker that this is more complex than it appears. And because of that, Madam President, I'd like to pose a question to the chair of PS&T if I could, to understand. It's my understanding that this went through already the committee. Is that right?
May I answer?
So Counselor Downs?
Yes, we considered the extension. We considered the temporary suspension of the overnight ban. That was rejected 2-5 with Counselor Bowman absent.
Okay, and Madam President, if I might indulge one more, I'd like to ask the chair of PS&T if she can summarize that discussion, so we can try to get, for those of us that can't attend PS&T because we're in other committees, what were the main points that could help us here?
So I suspect you'll hear many of these arguments tonight, but there were those who raised a series of reasons why they supported retaining the overnight parking ban in general, and applied those also to the 2-year trial suspension. One of the fears was that once this was granted, even temporarily, people would like it so much that we would never be able to put it back into law. We'd be going against the popular will. And those in favor of the 2-year trial said it's going to come up for a vote, we think, in 2 years. Going with data rather than without data to the polls could inform both the public vote, but also our choices afterward, because one of the options, of course, is that council could vote to immediately reinstate that law. It is binding, but of course we can go back and change the law immediately afterward. And I will refrain from my own opinions on that until I get a chance to speak. But those were as clearly as I can put it and as briefly as I can put it, were the main arguments.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. I'll yield back.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is Councilor Laredo.
So we have a singular question before us this evening, whether to approve a proposal that's been put out by a significant number of voters or not. If we reject it, they can, I expect, will go out and get the appropriate signatures, and then it's the will of the residents as to how they vote. And I, for one, if the residents vote to repeal the parking ban, will fully respect it. We need to listen to our residents. We need to act appropriately. And if they choose to reject something, I would not want to be on the floor of this council voting to immediately overturn something our residents have said they want to do. So I would be clear about that. I personally have my own views on the parking ban. I would not vote to repeal it. I'm happy to explain why. But I don't think we need to have that discussion this evening at all. I think Councilor Baker is quite right. This is if you're going to do a trial, and maybe a trial is the right way to do it, and maybe you do a trial in certain areas of the city, and you think about that, that's committee work. And this can go back to the committee, and the committee can work through over the next several weeks and come up with a thoughtful, coherent plan thought out in committee, and then present it to the full council in a proper fashion. But just to present something in an up or down vote tonight with no real thoughtful discussion in committee as to what a trial would look like, I just think is very bad policy for this council. There is no harm whatsoever in sending this back to committee. Not the main item, but someone can docket something, someone can propose it, you can act on it quickly. The committee has a month and a half to do any work it needs and can come back before this council. That's the way we ought to be doing business, and not just on the floor of the council making a unilateral change to an established policy in the city without really thinking it through. So I'll leave it at that. I don't think it's appropriate at this point to comment on the merits because there's a motion by my colleague, Councillor Kelly, and I would urge us to reject that motion, vote to reject. Let the voters, let the proponents gather their signatures and we'll put it to the voters. And if my colleagues want to do some test, some trial, work it through in committee, think it through carefully. Maybe you do select areas, maybe you do a whole variety of other things, but think it through. I'm just going to remind us of one other thing. I think we have short memories sometimes. I remember what snowfall was like last year. I remember what snowfall was like 2 years ago. And I remember, was it the winter of 2015 when we had about 100 inches of snow and streets were virtually impassable for months. So we need to have longer memories. And so what I'd urge, again, I'm going to urge that any test trial goes back to committee, work it through. I'm going to listen very carefully to that. It may be a very good trial that I could support, but do the homework before you come here for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grossman.
Thank you, Madam President. Several others who've spoken before me have hit on points that I agree with, so I don't want to repeat anything. I also don't support this amendment for two additional reasons that I will mention. And the first thing actually that I want to say is I want to thank all the people who are here this evening because I know there's so much passion on this particular topic. Ever since I stepped into the seat, there has been passion on this topic, and we've talked about it and debated it every year. And one of my points speaks to one of those key learnings over my 6 years here. So the first is timing-wise. I really struggle with the timing of this trial, given that we are on the eve of our village center zoning reform process reaching a vote before this council with very significant changes that are proposed across our city. And I have a really hard time understanding how we are going to look at the experience of this trial in light of what could be very significant change and be able to come to a long-term conclusion about whether it's the right path to proceed with. The second thing is that I don't see taking this particular ordinance off the books or this particular trial as the right tool. And this is what I was alluding to in thinking about my 6 years here. Every single time we've talked about it, other ideas come on the table that could more effectively bridge the gap and address the very real hardships that we have heard from some of our residents. And some of those stories are incredibly compelling and really merit some sort of exception and parking solution. We've heard from individuals who have true family and situational hardships, and we heard extremely compelling testimony at our Public Safety and Transportation Committee meeting from our ADA coordinator who spoke very passionately and very eloquently about the needs of those and that community. And it is an absolute no-brainer that we need to come up with a solution for those folks who really are struggling and have true hardship. To me, that tool has always spoken to some sort of a permit system, some other sort of technology that is out there that we have not done the work to find, fund, and bring here. We've talked a lot recently about free cash and excess amounts of free cash This strikes me as an opportune time to commit some funds and commit some energy and commit some work to finding a solution that actually addresses the core of the problem and brings it to those who need it, rather than using a broader tool that I just don't think is appropriate here. So I don't support the amendment, and I thank you for listening to my comments. And again, thank everybody here tonight for their passion and do understand why you care about it so deeply. So thank you.
Thank you. Right at 3 minutes. Councillor Gentile.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to interject a different train of thought and an issue that most people don't face here in the city, and it is personal, but I don't usually get into my own personal situation, but I can't help but to do so here. In addition to the issues raised by snow and how snowy a winter it is and safety, I have an additional problem in that I live extremely close to a university here in town. And I am completely frustrated by the lack of a number of parking restrictions that we have on the books now. So when I hear about this gathering of information, I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to get done, or the information is going to be correct. So please don't kid yourself. There are some very clear directives in my neighborhood that were put into place to help us to have some control over our city streets. Every time the university comes in for a permit or administrative site review, they adamantly make the case that there is parking for the students on campus, and yet when the students arrive in September, they're parked everywhere. And I resort to taking pictures, photos, I send them into traffic. We have a new captain in traffic who to this point hasn't been able to figure out how to get these parking requirements enforced. It seems to me quite simple. When you have a city councilor sending in pictures of cars parked for 12 hours in a 1-hour zone, I just fail to understand why it's so difficult. I've reached out to the chief on at least 3 occasions, and I'm still waiting to hear back. So those of you that think that the city's going to follow up and do a good job with collecting of data or enforcing existing parking restrictions, that's not been my experience. So if you do end up doing the trial, I'm going to ask that you help me, because I'm going to start sending you folks pictures so you can see the blatant abuses and help me get things enforced so we have some control over the streets, at least in my neighborhood. So I'm raising that now, so when you get these pictures, you'll know I told you they were coming. And I look for your help.
Thank you, Councillor Gentile. Councillor Leary is next.
Thank you, Madam President. I am going to associate myself with the comments of my fellow councilors, Gentile, Laredo, Baker, and particularly Councillor Grossman, I think made very thoughtful comments, and I'm not going to repeat them all, but parking is a very complex thing. You know, everybody loves free parking. I love free parking, but free parking has externalized costs, and we need to think about, especially in high-density areas. I represent Newton Corner and Nonantum. So if we allowed the cars just to park on the street right away without taking it back into committee, and I actually would propose a working group. I think this really needs a deep dive to get it right, because I am sympathetic to folks who, we've heard your stories. We've heard your stories, and parking has a cost. I don't believe it's elitist. I think parking is part of car ownership, just like buying gas, paying excise tax. It's part of car ownership. And the parking ban really, it's not even so much about snow removal. It's regulating parking, shifting mobility, balancing private vehicle use. And as Councilor Grossman said, we're right in the middle of village center zoning. We're about to pass it, where we're increasing density in our village centers. Now, I know everyone here has experienced Newton's traffic. So you get more traffic when you get more liberalized parking. You do. You get more traffic. And we want to mitigate that. It impacts everything from housing costs to our getting our streets swept, getting our recycling and trash barrels picked up. In Nonantum, we already have a Tuesday where we have cars move off the street so that we can sweep the streets instead of going through the middle of the street and sweeping it. So we need to do that for more parts of the city if we're going to repeal the parking ban, because we know, I don't need a trial. I know what happens. I've seen it during, living in Nonantum and Newton Corner, very tight street. It's a problem. I get a lot of complaints about it. I am willing to look, I was always really opposed to lifting it, but I see that people really care about it. Maybe we can come to some kind of compromise, and I'm hoping that we can. But I want to do it in the context of a permit parking system, thoughtful use of our, maybe our lots, shared parking. Parking really is a problem in the city, and I think just opening up our streets altogether without thoughtful planning is not the right thing to do. So I'm not going to support the motion either, but I would support bringing it back into committee, and actually I'd like to see a working group work on this and bring something back before the city council that we can actually agree on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Downs, I think you're next.
I'm willing to let my colleagues go first.
Okay. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, it's hard to top the great comments that have been made already, so I'm not even going to try to. I just want to jump in with my points. Again, very sympathetic to those who are negatively impacted by the ban. But as I've been communicating with the folks who've reached out to us, I do think it has an important, I'm sympathetic to, it's ridiculous that we can't park on the street when there's no snow on the ground. Could we come up with another technology solution for that, such as texting people? I'm sure that we could, but I do think it serves a very important co-benefit of restricting car ownership, disincentivizing car ownership, particularly in my ward. We've already seen a lot of development, and we go through a lot of trouble to tell the new projects, oh, you can only have this many parking spaces per unit. People have to pay separately for them. So if then we were just to say, oh, we're going to get rid of the overnight parking ban that acts as a disincentive to go beyond what you have for off-street parking, I think that there could be real negative impacts. And we're on the verge of approving a ton more by right housing, not just in village centers, but sort of creeping out and then looking to do more beyond that. So I think it serves an important benefit. That is why I do support maintaining it. Having said all that, I do agree with Councillor Baker and then those who've agreed with him that we should just vote up or down on this to start tweaking it. It's way too complicated. If that were to happen, I would want to have the chance, if it's next year, and theoretically, I would have wanted to have the chance to, if it was going to move forward with something, to share my opinion on sort of geographic limitations or whatever. I do, as there are a lot of residential parking permit programs in Newtonville already. So I work with David Kosis quite a bit on those. So I have some opinions on if we were to structure something, what it would look like. And I would want to have a chance to do that, not do it on the fly tonight. And I do wonder if we did vote for some sort of a trial or whatever tonight, well, what happens if the residents continue on collecting signatures? Wouldn't that sort of obviate our vote anyway? So I would urge our colleagues vote up or down tonight and then go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Krinsman.
Thank you, Madam President. I think we've heard some really thoughtful comments tonight, and I don't actually disagree with, I don't think anything that I've heard. My proposal or my idea is to deal with a lot of what folks have talked about. And let me very quickly explain what I mean. I think the parking ban originated from snow emergencies and a need to plow the streets. I think it's pretty clear to all of us that there are better ways to handle snow emergencies aside from an all-out overnight parking ban for certain months of the year. However, repealing the parking ban wholesale leaves a number of the concerns that folks have already articulated very well tonight, which are very real concerns. And so I think that we should, as a trial, not just repeal the ban, but actually replace it with some common sense parking restrictions and solutions that deal with some of the things that our colleagues have spoken about. For example, the parking in and around universities. I think we should, as part of the repeal, implement a solution that does continue to prohibit parking in and around the universities. I know folks in Chestnut Hill are upset about that. Folks in Auburndale are upset about that. We can deal with that, and we can deal with that problem specifically. We should also consider the Village Center Overlay District. I think there are plenty of folks who are concerned that when the Village Center Overlay District passes, it's simply going to push cars into the surrounding area. We can deal with that, specifically that in and around those areas. So if this motion fails, I will propose a similar motion through sending it back to committee. I think we should send it back to committee, and we should take a month and a half to design those restrictions. I think we can solicit the help of the mayor and the administration to actually design those restrictions that we think are common sense and that deal with the problems that we've spoken about. And if that comes back as a plan from the mayor within a month and a half, then by the middle of December, I think we can pass a 2-year trial, which repeals the all-out ban, but replaces it with these common sense restrictions that we would then approve as a council in the middle of December. So again, I'm going to vote no on this motion, but my intention is to offer a separate motion that actually repeals the ban for 2 years, but replaces it with some common sense solutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Baker, did you have a comment?
There's been talk about sending something back to committee. There's nothing to send back to committee. We have a choice tonight in response to the request for the initiative petition. I think we have to act on that. If there's a docket item that a councilor wants to docket and bring to the committee, and the committee can bring forward, as Councilor Laredo has indicated and Councilor Krinsman's indicated, that's possible. But I don't think there's an item that can be brought back to us that somehow repeals the parking ban and then puts a trial in place. It has to start as a separate item procedurally and then come through the council process, and that's the way we normally do this.
So, Councilor Baker, I think Councilor Krinsman has had conversations with the law department, but why don't we wait and get there, and then you can make your comment if Councilor Krinsman makes his proposal.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that then.
Okay, thank you. Next one is Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to associate myself with the comments made by Councilors Grossman, Leary, and Norton. And I'd also like to thank Jeremy Freudberg and his team for bringing this petition to repeal the winter parking ban, because it has finally forced us as a city to confront the problems of the ban head on. We've been dealing with the issue for many years and have avoided and postponing finding a workable solution. Over time, the issue has become so divisive, with both sides having dug in their heels, seemingly without the possibility of compromise. But I believe we can come up with a compromise that would help those burdened by the ban and keep the overparking of the streets in check with new development. So I don't support the 2-year trial, because we all know the issues involved, and which neighborhoods would be most impacted, and how many residents are terribly burdened by it. The 2-year trial would just delay the findings of a solution. I will work with my fellow councilors, with Traffic Council and the administration to come up with the solutions. One thing we can do right away this winter is to allow folks who park in our city lots to be allowed to stay there during a snow emergency. I hope we can at least do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilor Oliver.
Thank you, Madam President. I can't stand this thing. Is that better? All right. A lot of great stuff has been said. Thank you, everyone here. The only thing I really want to add to this conversation is this ban is no longer about just snow anymore. I think everyone understands that. The other thing I want to make sure that we're doing when we start to talk about trials and tests and collecting data, and we've heard a few of these pieces already, all the streets in our city are not created equal. Therefore, let's make sure that when we go out and we do conduct the trial, that we're getting the information that we need to make good decisions. That means Nonantum, it means Auburndale, it means around universities, and a lot of other situations that exist throughout the city. It's a pretty big place. There are a lot of streets here. So let's get it right. I cannot support this amendment for that very reason, but like I've already said in committee several times, not only do we hear everyone here, but we also hear all of the voices that are crying out for a better solution that does not create more problems. So let's get it right. Let's take our time and get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Councilor Bowman.
Thank you. I would agree that we've heard lots of good statements. And while I support the trial, I actually like the comments that we heard from Councilor Greenberg and Councilor Grossman. I think those are very, we've heard a lot of compelling reasons why the ban has a real hardship on a number of people, and we have not taken the action necessary to move this forward. I believe it was back in March that we first heard the report, studying the emails and comments that we had gotten from various residents and sort of putting them in a pro and con and looking at the various items. Yet it took the work of residents pulling together signatures, and that's no short effort to gather 6,000 plus signatures, and I no doubt they will complete this work, and we will have a petition, a ballot item on the 2025, so the 2025 ballot, and I feel that that has a very good chance of passing. And so while I've long been on record with very similar feelings to what we heard from Councilor Norton and Councilor Leary about the potential negative impacts and effect on our ability to meet various climate goals and transportation goals by removing the ban, I think I think the position we're in now is that the ban could very well be overturned in 2 years. And so how are we going to best position ourselves to understand what the impact of that ban being overturned is and how we might move forward? And I think that we're better off doing a trial. It's supposed to be a snowy winter. It'll give us a good opportunity to understand what it's like when it's overturned and be able to gather that data that would help us make better decisions. Otherwise, any studying we're doing is missing a key piece of data as to what really happens if there's no ban. We can have lots of discussions about what other communities are doing, like Brookline or others, but we won't have real data about what happens in Newton if there's no ban. So for that reason, I support doing a trial and working on real measures, because I do think ultimately the ban is having no ban is going to be problematic for all the reasons we've heard tonight, but I'd rather have the data and be able to move forward with better programs going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Malachy.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to address the question of the trial. I can't support that because I just don't see a trial in the next 2 years as giving us a meaningful picture of what a future without a parking ban winter overnight parking ban would look like. As Councilor Grossman stated, we're in the middle of voting on the Village Center Overlay District. It's not just the big projects that would produce hundreds of units without more than perhaps one parking space per unit. It's the, for example, the MRT district, where what are currently single lots, single family or two family lots, would be allowed to do 4 to 6 units by right with no parking requirement. Perhaps developers would choose to do a parking space or 2 parking spaces, but with 2 or 3 bedroom units, you might have families with 3 cars. The available curb space in front of that lot isn't going to increase when the density does. So you're going to have a lot more cars and people competing for the available curb space. That won't be reflected in the next 2 years. And beyond that, does anyone remember we were talking 2.5, 3 years ago about residential zoning, R1, R2, R3 neighborhood? The idea was floated of eliminating single-family only zoning. So potentially, and that idea has not been repudiated yet that I know of, so we could be looking at a future with much denser housing citywide in any residential district. And the experience that people are having now in multifamily streets, there's some in West Newton, the denser areas of the city, like the flat part of West Newton, which is a large part of my ward, Nonantum, that could be experienced by even more of the city, where there's basically more people looking for parking spaces than there would be available space on the street. And I don't want to see, Newton have space saver wars and people cruising the streets looking to find a space at night, or not having any place for their visitors to walk to park. So I won't be supporting the trial. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilor Markowitz.
Thank you, Madam President. A lot of the things I was going to say have been stated already. I would just add a couple of things about, first of all, I think the council hears the concern about ability to park your car for those who don't have adequate parking. I don't think that's going to be ignored. But I do think that undertaking whatever we're going to do is certainly complex. There are over 100 different parking rules. I know this serving on public safety and also as occasionally chairing traffic council. There's over 100 different parking rules. Our police officers aren't really there to enforce parking rules. We have 7 patrol cars out in the city at night in Newton, a city of 90,000 people, 18 square miles. And if you drive across Newton, it can take you 45 minutes. We have 7 patrol cars out. So we don't want our police officers looking for parking permits and parking violations. That's not what they are for. They're first responders. Now, the idea that we would somehow eliminate the parking ban is a question we need to answer, but I think there's a lot of complexities to it. People have already mentioned the universities. There are a number of streets that will have parked cars stored there. I have personal experience in my own ward in Auburndale where cars were left during the summer for weeks on end, and despite calling for enforcement from the police, nothing was done. They decided it was okay. Well, that's 1 car here, 1 car there. It's not that big of a deal. But on a bigger scale, we will not be able to manage that. So we need to do more work on this. I think I'm going to agree. I think Councilor Leary was the first one to bring up, I apologize if someone else did before, but this just needs more work. I mean, I think there's ways to deal with. We have areas of the city that are more, it would be interesting on the emails. When you do send emails, put your address down. I'd like to know really where the pain is, and I can't tell that from unless I look everybody up and their address and so forth. But it would be helpful to know where the real pain points are. I think they're in some of the north side wards. I don't think there's so much issue in the south side wards, but I don't know. But I think any solution we have, and if we're going to start collecting data, we need to collect real data, data that's complete, not data that's sporadic you know, like how many new cars were bought or whatever. I mean, I bought another car this year, but I've got 2 driveways, okay? Yeah, I have 2 driveways. So I don't feel the pain, but I do and a garage on top of that. And I don't rent out parking, although if you're really nice to me, I might let you park your car in my driveway, which I do sometimes. Sorry for the digression, but seriously, we need to come back with a comprehensive plan that understands where we can allow parking to be year-round, overnight, so we don't have safety issues, so we don't have situations where we get parked up, and where we have areas in the universities. You know, several of us have been involved. I don't know, I bet every counselor in here has been in traffic council with a parking restriction, you know, either for, you know, commuters parking in the areas and so forth, or all the different issues that we face. But we need to take all that in. We certainly do have the knowledge of it, excuse me, and take that all into effect and come back with something that makes sense, that we can agree and vote on. So I won't be supporting the amendment. I will just say, I think the problem with doing the trial right now is it's blunt. It just completely removes.
Councilor Markowitz, you need to ask for more time.
Another minute, please.
Councilor Markowitz has asked for an additional minute. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I think lifting the ban is, thank you. I think lifting the ban is somewhat blunt because everything goes out the window with that. And, you know, realistically, if we go for 2 years and people buy cars who don't have cars now with the expectation they can keep them on the street, or developers put up housing that does not have sufficient parking and their residents, tenants, whatever, put cars on the street in 2 years, how can we go back and then tell people, now you have to find a place to park your car? We're taking that privilege away from you. I don't see us ever doing that. I don't think politically that would ever be feasible. So it's a little blunt. If it was shaped tighter and so forth, maybe some amendment will come forward. I just think there's more work to do on this, and maybe we can come back with something that we can approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Lucas.
So thank you, President Albright, and I also want to thank everyone here who has, I presume, signed the petition. I want to thank Mr. Freudberg for leading this petition and bringing this issue before the council, because it is an important issue. But I am going to vote against Councilor Kelly's amendment for reasons that other folks have stated earlier today. This should be discussed, any sort of trial or any other parking plan should be discussed in committee, not on the floor of the council. As others have said, it's bad policy. But I want to highlight something which was Councilor Grossman who said, and I've been thinking this for a long time. I've been saying it for a long time, I know, because I've had many conversations with Mr. Freudberg about this. But just if we could come up with some parking pass, I think that's what you were getting at earlier. I think that is the best way to handle this situation, where in theory we would keep the ban, but allow folks who need to park on the street overnight to allow them to park on the streets overnight without, dare I say, opening up the floodgates. That's where I'm at. And I think a working group, did you say the working group? Councilor Leary, who mentioned the working group, I think that is the right way to tackle this situation. It needs to be targeted. We need a targeted approach, not a, dare I say, a clean sweep repeal of the overnight parking ban. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilor Crosley.
Thank you, Madam President. At the moment, I'm counting how many councilors haven't spoken yet. I wasn't going to, but I'm really impressed with the conversation tonight. I'm really impressed with several of my colleagues, in particular, Councilor Grossman, Councilor Leary, and Councilor Greenberg. Jeremy Freudberg, your passion and determination is exemplary, and I fully expect you're going to be bringing a full-born petition and ballot question before us. And thank you, because coming up in 2 years is maybe enough time for us to get our heads around the complexity of this issue. I agree with Councilor Lucas. I think there will need to be permits issued, and soon, for the folks who are really struggling, as several of you have mentioned. Without going around the room and referring to everything that everybody has said, I want to go back, if we can, to Councilor Krinsman's proposal. I realize we're on the item. I am not going to support a full-blown 2-year trial period that will affect the entire city. I like the idea of crafting a trial of some nature to help us understand, where somebody said where those pain points are, and how we might treat different streets differently. So I'm going to vote against this particular motion, but I'm going to be very interested to understand how we work through, with a working group or whatever, and craft a pilot project that has some limitations, has some clear scope, and can maybe carve out some of the areas that are uncertain at the moment, like the Village Center Overlay District. I also want to take this opportunity, however, to mention that in listening to this, but actually it's been something I've been considering for a long time, I think Councilor Malachy made a point about the proposed multi-residence transit district, which is the one, if we pass the Village Center Overlay zoning, it is concentrated in our villages, but we're also allowing 3 to 6 units where they fit in the immediate surrounding neighborhoods. And I intend in committee, and I have for a while, if it doesn't pass, I'll bring it back up in full council.
Councilor Crosley, you're slightly off topic here. If you could just wrap it up.
I am, but it's, thank you. I'm going to propose an amendment to eliminate, to increase the parking, to have a parking requirement in that MRT zone, which doesn't affect our unit count much. So if that has any bearing on what anybody's thinking about in terms of this repeal, I think that's something that we can do, and we need to be thinking of how everything fits together. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to thank Jeremy Freiberg and my constituents from Ward 8 that are here tonight that I've talked to. I've been for repealing this ban probably 15, 20 years before I was on the council, and I still believe it should be repealed now. We should have done all the work up front. Maybe I sat in this gallery waiting to get on the council. I had already been elected. At that time, the duration of the winter parking ban was rolled back a bit and made shorter, and maybe that's when we should have started working on these things, but we didn't. And I'll take some of that blame too. But it needs to be tweaked. I said this talking to people today. We need to take into consideration Boston College, LaSalle, maybe Northland. Doesn't look like the other ones are going to get built, but there's things we could do. You know, the narrow streets have to only have parking on one side. Yeah, we have to do that, but I want this to go into effect now. It doesn't look like we're going to have the votes, but I am going to support Councilor Kelly's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan. Councilor Danberg.
Thank you, Madam President. I wasn't going to speak tonight either, but I guess I will, and I'll try and be short. I'm going to approve the trial because I think that I agree that the residents will, in all likelihood, complete the number of petitions, signatures on the petition to bring this ban in the next election up before the city. And I do think that there is, in all likelihood, enough support to do away with the ban. I think that in light of that it's better for us to have a 2-year trial so that we can gather data. And I agree that there are places in the city where this is not going to work as well as it will in other places. And we've heard from the neighbors in those areas, and we do have some idea about where they are. And this 2-year period will allow us the time to craft some tweaks so that we can get this right. So I will support the trial because I don't think it does any good to have the people that have been suffering for so long trying to juggle their cars to have to go through another winter of doing that. So I will support the trial. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Downs, I've saved you for last. It's your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that, and I appreciate this discussion, which is why I wanted to come in last, because so many of these comments are right on target. One of the reasons that PS&T has not moved forward on addressing the overnight parking ban and working on trials is because it is a tremendous amount of work, and we were aware of that. The initiative petition has forced us to reevaluate that and try to find a way to provide more immediate relief. Listening to my colleagues and to the petitioners very carefully, I reconsidered a lot of my objections to the overnight parking ban and said to myself, we're going to have this vote in 2 years. It's better to have data than not data, which are points that other people have made. A couple of clarifications I can count, so I know this is not going to pass, but a 2-year trial would not be something I would bank on if I were thinking about a new car purchase or a development. That is something that you would put off because it is a trial. And you know that in 2 years it could go one way or another. Without a trial, we will be voting without the data that we could collect with a trial. And whatever work my committee does would probably just be wrapping up as the overnight parking ban is repealed. And I'm not quite sure where that leaves us legally, but I've been advised that if it has something to do with that section of the law, it would be repealed at the same time. And that's something also to consider. So I will be supporting the trial, again, because I think we ought to have the data. I agree that it would have been far better for us to have done it in committee, but again, we did not have the time to do so. And at this point, we're under a very short deadline. So thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Councillor Baker.
Again, I don't know if we have the actual motion in writing, but I think it's something anytime we vote on something this complicated, it ought to be in writing and available.
I think the clerk will put it up for us.
But on the substance, I think it's really important. We've talked about a trial. The trial that is being proposed is repealing the parking ban. So it is not a matter of saying we're going to try some restrictions and some not. It's to try it's a repeal of the ban. So that's, again, why I'm not ready to support it as a matter of policy.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you for putting the wording, I think, up on the screen. I think that's important for everyone. I just have a quick couple of closing comments. Maybe this is linguistics, perhaps, Councillor Baker, but this is not repealing the ban. It's temporarily suspending it. And I view that as a linguistics major in college as a big difference. And the other thing I'd like to say, I've heard about what a broad tool this is, and it's too broad. There's no broader tool than bluntly refusing to let people park on the streets for 4 solid months for maybe 2 nights of a storm. I think this is a very bludgeon-like tool when perhaps tweezers are more appropriate. I'll just leave you with that thought, because I had the image last week about toothpaste not coming back in the tube, thanks to Councilor Markowitz. But I'd like you to think about a bludgeon instrument versus tweezers, because that's what I think the winter parking ban is. And I'll call the question when we're ready.
Okay. I think we are ready. I think I would just like to have one final thing to say before we vote, and that is that perhaps folks have forgotten that Councilor Kelly and I docketed an item to discuss the parking ban in the Public Safety Committee at the beginning of this term, and it sat there all term. We had plenty of time to talk about it. Councilor Kelly and I have had meetings with the police, and we've been rebuffed about a permit program, about technology. There's no solution that involves the police department that's going to help us, and that's all I'll say. And we can call the roll.
Is this a friendly amendment? Is that added as well?
Do you want to read the amendment for the? Would you like us to read it out loud?
It's the yes, and please clarify what a yes vote and a no vote mean.
So a yes vote would mean that you are voting for this item in lieu of the petition. So it would be a rejection of the petition, and it would be putting this in its place. That's a yes vote.
In fact, a motion to substitute for the committee report, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So a yes vote is voting for the trial.
Yes vote is voting for the trial. The restriction, is this the highlighted part?
The highlighted part,
Okay,
yes.
I'm going to read it. The restriction on overnight parking set forth in the preceding section 19-174B shall be suspended and ineffective for a trial period commencing December 1, 2023 and ending March 31st, 2025. The suspension will expire on March 31st, 2025, and thereafter, Section 19-174B shall resume effectiveness unless further amended. Okay. Councilor Bowman, do you have a point of order?
Point of order. I did ask if the friendly amendment to add the data, although I do expect that this will not pass, I do think it in the record should note that we were calling on the administration to gather data.
Gather data. As described, the four elements described by Councilor
Yes, so if we could.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Ready? Councilor Baker.
No.
Councilor Bowman.
Aye.
Councilor Crossley.
No.
Councilor Danberg.
Aye.
Councilor Downs.
Aye.
Councilor Gentile. Councilor Greenberg.
No.
Councilor Grossman.
No.
Councilor Humphrey.
Aye.
Councilor Kalis.
No.
Councilor Kelly.
Aye.
Councilor Krinsman.
No.
Councilor Laredo.
No.
Councilor Leary.
No.
Councilor Lipoff.
No.
Councilor Lucas.
No.
Councilor Maliki.
No.
Councilor Markowitz. Councilor Noel.
No.
Councilor Norton.
No.
Councilor Oliver. Councilor Ryan.
Aye.
Councilor Wright.
No.
President Albright.
Aye.
Motion fails with 7 yeas and 17 nays.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Krinsman, do you have something for us?
Thank you, Madam President. So my proposal again is to do something very similar, but we don't exactly know what it is tonight. So functionally, what I'm gonna move is that we send this back to committee. Let me take you through this from two perspectives. One, from the perspective of the petitioners. It's basically a binary choice tonight. We either approve this or we don't, which means we either don't approve it, substitute something, anything other than approve it to the petitioners is a rejection of their petition, and they will start collecting signatures, and they have 45 days to put this on the ballot. My suggestion is to send this back to committee. I think we then have 45 days to come up with the plan, and my hope is that we will ask the administration for some assistance and some staffing to develop a parking scheme that accounts for the things that we've spoken about tonight. I can list those off to you, what I would intend to bring up before the committee and with the administration, but that we would then by the middle of December, by the end of that 45 days that the petitioners have to collect signatures, we would potentially pass a 2-year trial of both the repeal of the all-out ban, but putting in place specific restrictions that target the concerns that many of us have. Let me very quickly say what some of those concerns are. Colleges and universities. I think we want a parking plan to incorporate some sort of zone around colleges and universities where overnight parking is prohibited at least part of the year. Area around the Village Center overlay district. I think accommodations for individuals with temporary or permanent disabilities should be a part of that, as well as any street that is too narrow to safely implement overnight parking ought to be considered an area for a prohibition. With those in mind, again, I would ask that we send this back to committee so that we can take the 45 days to develop that plan. And then my hope is that in mid-December, when we bring this item back before the council, we can approve that 2-year trial at that time.
So two things. Councilor Krinsman, are you talking about changing the start date of the parking ban?
I apologize. Yes, thank you, Madam President. I do think that what we should do is push the start of this year's winter parking ban to January 1st to give us the time to do that.
And the second thing I would add, and I'll call on you in a second, Councilor Baker, is that
Data collection.
the mayor has agreed to ask her staff to do such a plan. And although she's in favor of repealing the whole thing, she would ask her staff to do a plan based on criteria that the Public Safety Committee would hand to her. Now, Councilor Baker.
I have a question for the clerk.
Let Councilor Baker speak first, Councilor Downs.
Thank you. I think Madam President, I think this motion is really out of order. We have a decision to make on the item on the report of the committee on the basic question that's being asked. There's a docket item that you've referenced earlier that is before the council. It's perfectly open to the council through the Public Safety Committee to consider any proposal. But we have 30 days to act on this item, yes or no, and we have to do that. The petitioners always have the right to go and seek additional signatures. That 45 days is not an issue for this particular matter. If Councilor Krinsman has an idea, and obviously there have been a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes that the members of the council have not been privy to, about various options that could be considered and how they could be considered. It's certainly appropriate to bring that to the Public Safety Committee if the chair is willing to entertain that and undertake the discussion in the committee. There's a docket item live available for that purpose, and it can be brought forward. But a motion to recommit is not the motion we need to do. The motion we have to decide now is to approve the committee report, and the committee report is to deny the item that has been requested by the citizens. That doesn't mean another item cannot come before the council in due course, just as Councilor Krinsman has indicated, and perhaps be informed by a working group or other process. But I think it's a grave mistake to try and get into that kind of complexity at this level and to have it a motion to recommit. That's not in order. This is really a motion on the question, and we should decide the question and let that item come before us. So I would respectfully ask to call the question on the motion on the item that is the Public Safety Committee has reported so that we can vote that. We have another item on the discussion tonight which is quite substantial, and I want to make sure we have time. That doesn't diminish any of the concerns that have been raised by citizens here or otherwise or through this conversation. It's just procedurally, I think it's the wisest course.
Councilor Baker, were you calling the question?
Point of order, please, before the question's called.
Yes.
There was a committee report on the floor. There was a motion to substitute the trial. That failed. The committee report is now back on the floor. If Councilor Krinsman wants to make a motion to recommit, it's in order, okay? Even though I agree on the subject, the substance of the subject with Councilor Baker, I respectfully disagree that you can't move to recommit. Recommittal is in order.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. And Madam President, just to respond to my colleague on the point of order, he's absolutely right. A motion to recommit is in order. But what that does is it essentially means the council has not acted on the item within 30 days, and the parking ban is denied. So that's, I think, the procedural effect. But I think in order that a more orderly way to proceed is as I've indicated. But if people want to talk about the motion to recommit, I'll withdraw my request to call the question. I just thought we would move this along so we could get it to a conclusion.
And that's why I had a question for the clerk.
Go ahead, Councilor Downs.
And my question for the clerk is, my understanding in our discussions with the law department were that the clock is running, the clock runs out on November 1st, whatever we do on the floor. The petitioners have their 45 days, and the motion has basically, their petition has basically failed on November 1st, regardless of what Councilor Princeman and the rest of us do, unless we approve it tonight or shortly.
That is correct.
It's basically a denial.
Yes, failure to act within the 30 days of November 1st. Yes.
So before I call on others, Councilor Princeman, you had conversations with the law department. Is there anything that you feel is important to convey to the council?
I think that's accurate. I think the way Councilor Downs presented it is accurate. I think there are two different perspectives on this. There's the perspective of the petitioners, and from the perspective of the city charter and what happens to their petition. If we do not approve it by November 1st, they have the right to start collecting signatures and put it on the ballot. From the city council perspective, sort of as Councilor Baker was talking about, we can take action at any time on a docket item before us. We will not have met the deadline of November 1st to stop the petitioners from collecting signatures or put this on the ballot. But what we can do is in the 45 days following that November 1st deadline, we can attempt to persuade the petitioners that we have come up with a suitable plan and a suitable option, obviating or alleviating them of the need to go to the ballot in 2025.
So our clerk wants to make sure that we all know that the petitioner is able to submit signatures anytime within the 40 days. We don't have to wait the 45 days. Okay, Councilor Rado.
So the president reminded all of us that she and Councilor Kelly have had a docket item pending in PSNT for some time. Obviously now, given the extensive discussion tonight, there probably is some sense of, I don't want to say urgency, but a better word might be eagerness, and I think really consensus from virtually all of us that this is an issue we should address. There's a docket item that's available to address it starting tomorrow. So there's no need to send this back to committee, as Councilor Princeman suggested. His request can be handled expeditiously if the committee so chooses, and come back to us as soon as possible. But this idea of starting to tinker with start dates and all this other stuff, look, folks, let PSNT do its work, okay? If they really think between now and December 1st they're going to come back with a well-thought-out plan for the next couple of years, great, we'll consider it. We'll consider it promptly. I suspect a really well-thought-out plan may take a little more time than that, maybe a lot more time if we're really going to do this right and address both the very legitimate concerns that we've heard from folks who are adversely affected by the parking ban and the legitimate concerns we have of folks who are worried about the effect on climate, on narrow streets, on student parking in certain areas of the city. So I would respectfully suggest that we vote no, or we vote to approve what the PSNT did, which is to reject the petition. That gets the clock going. And PSNT, I think, charged with the collective thoughts that we've engendered in our very thoughtful discussion this evening, has some idea of which way to proceed. And we let them do their work and we provide their input. I hope they hear from the folks who support the repeal of the parking ban. I hope they hear from the folks who advocate for the continuation of a parking ban. And I think, as Councilor Grossman in particular, but others quite appropriately stated, let's try to get it right. So please, let's not tinker with this. Let's not send it back to committee. Vote this down, but take up the pending item, which allows you to accomplish exactly what I think many, if not most, if not all of us want to do. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilor Laredo. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you. I just have a quick, I think it's a very quick question, clarification, procedure, schedule. If we're worrying about timeframes here, there was some discussion about the ability to have a special meeting. Could either the president or the clerk address what that might be?
Well, we haven't talked about special meetings yet, but let me just say that the clerk and I have already talked about the need for a special meeting to discuss the zoning. And I think the clerk came up with a date of the alternate Wednesday that we don't usually have meetings.
Yeah, the alternate.
And so that would be, we haven't announced any of this yet, but it would be for the zoning. To find another meeting for this purpose might be difficult, but we can look for one if that's what people want.
I mean, if we wanted to, if we'd like to make before the November 1st deadline, there is October 25th, but that's without going to PS&T first.
Yeah,
we'd have to have that meeting first, and I don't know their schedule. So.
Okay. So does that answer your question, Councilor Kelly? Okay. Does anybody else want to speak? Councilor Crossley.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just hoping that you and/or the clerk could please review the time constraints and be clear about the absolute day by which we need to make a decision and for what purpose.
Are you talking about the parking or the zoning?
The parking.
The parking.
No, I don't want
Okay.
to talk about zoning tonight. Thank you.
Council President, is November 1st.
November 1st would be
the final day that we can act.
Okay. Now, if we fail to act, it's as a rejection.
It's considered a rejection.
Councilor Crossley.
Thank you. So Councilor Krinsman doesn't have his proposal in writing on the screen, but he has articulated a scope that I think could be go back to committee. If we don't need to vote on this tonight, we can postpone the vote until then. We don't have another meeting. Is that correct?
We do not have another PS&T meeting scheduled, nor another council meeting scheduled before the 1st.
So then the issue, please clarify this for me. We can't vote on it then before then, so it would be effectively denied, but there is a docket item that can be used to move ahead. What we might have done, I suppose, was to seek an amendment, a friendly amendment to Councilor Kelly's. I understand we voted that. Is it just that, all right, one final question. We may act by proposing something in lieu of the repeal, but are we not able to articulate that in general terms so that the committee can go to work on and finish the scope? Does it have to be completely specified? Does that make sense?
The trial is still a rejection as well.
The trial,
in lieu of, a substitution in lieu of is still considered a rejection.
I understand.
So, okay, I just want to make sure.
I just was wondering if we could wrap it together so that we can be clear to the public what we're going to do.
I would bring the PS&T chair in on this.
Councilor Downs, we could use some help. Do you have how many more committee meetings do you have this term?
I believe we have 2. We do not have one this week because we had no items. So that leaves us.
You do actually have an item, Councilor Downs. You're not taking it up, but you have one.
not in time for us to have called the meeting. It is now less than 48 hours
Yes.
before
So she would need a special meeting.
Tuesday. So we would need a special meeting. We also have one in November and then Thanksgiving and one in December. I do not think personally that we have time to craft a plan that we would be able to bring before the council by the end of the term.
To be clear, I think Councillor Krinsman is not asking for a plan to be developed by the Public Safety Committee. Rather, he's asking the Public Safety Committee to develop criteria to give to the mayor so that the mayor's staff can develop the plan. I think, am I correct, Councillor Krinsman? Councillor Krinsman, do I have that right?
Well, yes and no, Madam President. I think we have articulated many of the criteria tonight that the mayor can begin to work with, but I do think when the mayor is done proposing the plan that follows those criteria, it will come before PS&T, who can then weigh in on it before it comes to full council.
Right. Okay.
So I think that's I think Councillor Baker is correct. This is a docket item.
Okay.
So, Madam President, can I ask if the maker of the motion to recommit would reconsider his motion and let us vote on the main item? Because we have a docket item and there is a procedural vehicle for it, and the mayor's office apparently has the willingness to do some homework and bring something to the committee. So there's no action by the council required in order for that to occur at this time. Is that correct?
Councillor Krinsman, there's been a request to, go ahead.
My first question, Madam President, isn't your item that is before the committee, isn't that a discussion item, or is it an actual?
No, it's not a discussion item, it's an actual item asking for changes in the parking ban.
I see. Okay, so we could use that. I'm not interested in rejecting the petition because I'm very sympathetic to the petition from the petitioners. That's why I don't want to reject it, even though sending back to committee is a functional rejection for their purposes and their continued purposes. That's why I draw the distinction.
May I procedurally suggest to the maker of the motion that he could support, he could oppose the committee report, which is denial, and maintain his posture towards that item, but allow the item to proceed in due course through the docket item that is already before the committee. So if it would speed up our process, if he wants to bring his motion to recommit to the floor, we can vote on it, but I would think that it might save time to withdraw it, let us act on the committee report, which is denial, take that, and then what you're arguing is that there's an opportunity to do some homework, which might ultimately dissuade the folks who could need the additional signatures from gathering those signatures or putting them into the process. But that's obviously their decision, and we would not have to be able to promise them anything. So the question is, do you want to proceed, or do you want for a vote or not? That's what I'm asking.
Councillor Krinsman.
Madam President, my preference is to send this item back to committee, but the votes will fall where they may. I think we've all spoken enough.
Okay.
We can just vote.
Then we should
I think
vote.
it's 3 votes at this point.
Unless anybody else wants to speak on that item, we can call the question and vote on it.
Is it?
So the idea would be to send this item back to committee, have them develop criteria to send to the mayor to develop a plan for a 2-year trial. And I think you're also talking about pushing the start of the ban to January 1st. Do I have that correct?
But that's not part of, that's not, with all respect, if you recommit the item, that's all that's going on. There can be exhortations that there are various things that go on in committee, but there's no, it's just recommittal, and that's effectively a denial of the item. And the committee can take that discussion, but frankly, that item is mooted because it's only the question that has come to us through the citizen petition. There's nothing to recommit. You have the item already in committee on the parking ban that you can deal with. So procedurally, I would just suggest we vote down the motion to recommit, let the item go through the process of the council. Then all of the conversation that Councillor Krinsman has talked about can occur in committee and through the intervention of the executive department.
Okay. Councillor Rado.
I agree with my colleague from Ward 7 100%. Let's keep this simple. Let's keep this direct. I don't speak for PSNT or its leadership, but you know, there's nothing to prevent a committee chair, if they want and the committee's available, to having extra meetings. In land use, we do that probably more than we all like, but we do have lots of meetings. And I'm not suggesting we all have a lot on our plates right now, so I'm well aware of that, but let's just keep this simple tonight, please. And we do have another item to consider. I think we're making this way too complex. Let's just get it done. Thank you.
Council Leary?
I'll be very brief. I want to approve just the committee's report to deny, and I'd like, rather than go through Councilor Krinsman's amendments. And we're not going to be able to do things by January 1st anyway. I mean, look how long it's taking us to think about how we're going to move forward with this whole process. I mean, we need more than 45 days or however long that is, and I want to do it right. So I'm aligning myself with Councilor Laredo and Councilor Baker. Okay, so just let's make it simple. And I would vote against Councilor Krinsman's amendment.
Okay, so why don't we call the question on Councilor Krinsman's amendment, and then we can be on the main item.
This is the motion to recommit.
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Baker?
No.
Counselor Bowman?
No.
Counselor Crossley?
No.
Counselor Danberg? No. Counselor Downs?
No.
Counselor Gentile? Counselor Greenberg?
No.
Counselor Grossman?
No.
Counselor Humphrey?
No.
Counselor Kalis?
No.
Counselor Kelly?
No.
Counselor Krinsman? Counselor Laredo?
No.
Counselor Leary?
No.
Counselor Lipoff?
No.
Counselor Lucas?
No.
Counselor Maliki?
No.
Counselor Markowitz?
No.
Counselor Noel?
No.
Counselor Norton?
No.
Counselor Oliver? Counselor Ryan?
No.
Counselor Wright?
No.
President Albright?
Yes.
Motion fails with 2 yeas and 22 nays.
All right, we're back on the main item. Is there anything that anybody wants to say before we vote? So now this is a vote the motion is to deny the petition. Okay, we can call the roll.
Counselor Baker?
Aye.
Counselor Bowman?
Aye.
Counselor Crossley?
Aye.
Counselor Danberg?
Aye.
Counselor Downs?
Aye.
Counselor Gentile? Counselor Greenberg?
Aye.
Counselor Grossman?
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey?
Aye.
Counselor Kalis?
Aye.
Counselor Kelly?
No.
Counselor Krinsman?
Aye.
Counselor Laredo?
Aye.
Counselor Leary?
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff?
Aye.
Counselor Lucas?
Aye.
Counselor Maliki?
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz?
Aye.
Counselor Noel?
Aye.
Counselor Norton?
Aye.
Counselor Oliver? Counselor Ryan?
No.
Counselor Wright?
Sorry, aye.
President Albright?
No.
Motion carries 22 yeas, 2 nays.
Okay, very good. We are done.
There were three.
There are 3 nays.
3
How
nays.
many did you say?
I did not catch. I have Counselor Kelly and Counselor Ryan.
And me.
And Albright.
Sorry. I apologize. The vote is 21 yeas and 3 nays.
Okay, the last item on tonight's agenda is item, where the heck is it? Here it is, item 306-23. Councilor Grossman.
Thank you, Madam President. Looking at the time, I'm beginning to think you all just really enjoy discussing the Operations Booster Stabilization Fund at 10 p.m. Here we are again. This is item 306-23. We have discussed this item on a number of occasions. It first came to the Finance Committee on September 11th, and Finance denied the motion to approve. That was subject to second call. 3 in favor, 4 opposed, 1 abstention. Then it came here to the full council on the 18th of September, and the council voted to recommit the item to the Finance Committee, 22 in favor, 2 opposed, 2 abstentions. It then went back to the Finance Committee for the first time on the 28th of September. At that time, the committee held it 5-2. The main impetus for holding it on that occasion was that the committee posed a number of questions to our CFO, Maureen Lemieux, to bring back to the mayor for further consideration. We then had the meeting on the 10th of October, where Ms. Lemieux came back and further discussed the mayor's reactions. And at that point, the committee denied the item. So there were 5 in favor of denial and 3 opposed. So now it is back before us. A brief reminder of what this is. This is a sum of $26 million that has arisen out of the declaration of overlay surplus as well as associated interest, really driven in the greatest part by our settlements with Eversource for back taxes that they had contested over the course of a number of years, and the fact that they chose to drop those suits in lieu of losing similar suits in other communities. The mayor has proposed to take this sum, put it into what she's referring to as the Operations Booster Stabilization Fund, the Stabilization Fund being a legal type of a fund that requires a 2/3 vote of this council to create and would require a 2/3 vote of this council to appropriate funds from. The main purpose or sort of intent, as the mayor has described it, to essentially structure the investment of these funds, or essentially the gathering of interest income on these funds and then expenditure over a period of 8 years to mimic the effects of what would happen if we had reduced our pension appropriation growth and contributions from the current 6.6% a year, which is where we landed last spring, down to 5% a year. In measuring the delta of the quote-unquote savings of what we then don't have to contribute to the pension fund, then dividing those funds 70% to go to the operating budget of the Newton Public Schools, 30% to go towards closing the growing and forecasted gap in our annual budgeting as our CFO projects it forward. I'm happy to get into any further details, but I know that there are motions on timing around this question. I think it probably makes the most sense to hear those before getting into further substance.
Okay.
Thank
so
you.
Before, Councilor Kalis, you put this on second call, and then I'll call on you, Councilor Crosley.
Yeah, I did, because I'd like to amend the report to substitute approval for denial. And I can speak about that if you'd like, or whatever process you want.
Well, so you're making an amendment, you're asking to amend the motion to substitute approval for denial, and would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. So I feel strongly, we've talked about this quite a bit in finance, and feel strongly that we need to support this, because at the end of the day, it's a good plan. It converts one-time funds, as Councilor Grossman was talking about, into operating funds, which are critical to running the city. At its core, it's giving additional ongoing funds to the schools, at 70% to the schools, and to about 30% to the municipal side. Now, our discussion in committee focused a lot on the fact that the plan doesn't have a lot of the flexibility that some councilors would want. We talked about how some of the councilors would take the money and spend it differently, which is fine. That's everybody's prerogative. But the fact is that it's before us because the mayor's putting it before us. All of the ideas that we have are good ideas. She has said no to those, and that's her prerogative. But in the end, what it comes down to is, do we want to give more money in this fashion to the schools in an operating way, also to the municipal side, or not. And to me, the schools are bedrock for us. And every year that I've been a counselor, we're always asking for more money for the schools. I think it's one way to do it. It's not the perfect way as far as I see it, but it's a good way. And I think we should be supporting this, and I think we should see it through. So I feel strongly that we need to approve it, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Sir, you can close those doors. Thank you. Councilor Crossley.
Well, thank you, Madam President, but I'm wondering, do we need to vote on the motion to substitute before we talk about, because I agree completely with Councilor Kalis. I would vote for this tonight, but I think there might be a key piece of information that folks might like to have, and I might like to move postponement and have that discussion, but I think perhaps we should take up this motion to substitute approval for denial, which is on the table, and I don't wish to speak to that.
Okay. Okay. So Councilor Gentile, I think, is next.
I rise to speak against Councilor Kalis's motion to substitute approval for denial. For the benefit of those folks that are not in finance, there's a couple of important pieces of information that I really think that you need to have. Finance, as Councilor Kalis said, discussed this over several nights, and we did so because there was a desire to get to a yes to set up a reserve fund. Where there was a difference of opinion is if we were going to have the reserve fund be a stabilization fund with the explicit, restrictive ways that the money can be spent versus a reserve fund that was just a general reserve fund. And I don't think anybody in finance would have opposed to doing that. The problem is that the mayor refused to negotiate, and I don't think it makes sense for us to just say, well, the mayor refuses to negotiate, so now we're going to vote for a plan that we don't think is in the best interest of the city. The General Reserve Fund would have provided more flexibility for this administration and for future administrations. And it is true that some of us did not think that it was a good policy for this mayor or any mayor to try and tie the hands of future administrations for as long as 8 years. Budgets are fluid. Budgets evolve. Budgets change from year to year. A lot of things happen. And to try and say now that a particular department should receive a specific allocation 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, I have to say I've never seen that ever in municipal finance, and I think it's a terrible idea. The city council, one thing I also want to make clear, especially to members of the public, this is not a rejection of the schools or trying to give additional money to the schools. It's a desire to have the flexibility to spend money on both operating needs and on capital needs in the future as a mayor and a city council see fit. There are times when we may want to use this money for a very important capital need. As some of us said in committee, we have a list of capital items. I think that the COO mentioned that they added 111 this year.
Councilor Gentile, you need to ask for more time.
Well, I need to ask for 2 more minutes, please.
Councilor Gentile would ask for 2 more minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Please go ahead.
And, you know, a list that's as long as both of my arms, and, you know, there isn't a lot of money to get all those capital items that are on that list, and many of them extremely important, done. So again, we want that flexibility. I'm going to ask to please consider another thought. This is the city council. We have a responsibility to all of the departments in the city. And I agree and I understand that, you know, the schools are extremely important. My 4 kids went there. I taught in the school system. I coached in the school system. I was on the school committee. All right, I understand the importance, but I also understand that as a city council and as city councilors, we need to see the big picture. So please think back to many budgets when there are always these discussions about adding to the inspectional services department because there aren't enough people in the department to enforce zoning violations. Motions to add planning into the preservation department. You heard me whining earlier about a lack of parking enforcement. When I asked the new captain, what is so hard about enforcing these blatant violations, I'm told it's a big city, we don't have enough staff. There's all kinds of things that we have expressed in the past that we could use money for on the city side. So to say that in year 1, that in year 7, we're gonna give, you know, $3.5 million or whatever it is, that is not the way that we should be budgeting. So there's some other things that I wanna say, but
Councilor Gentile, you're out of time.
No, I'm gonna thank you for the 2 minutes and sit down to listen to what other people say.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam President. So I had the privilege of sitting through the discussion in finance, even though I'm not a member of the Finance Committee, because I really want to understand the proposal better. So here's my takeaway from all this and what I'm going to really suggest that we all do. I think the idea of setting some kind of reserve, as Councilor Gentile said, is quite wise, and I applaud the mayor for doing that. I think that's the right thing to do. However, I think it is a tremendous mistake to tie our hands for 8 years in the future and not give us the necessary flexibility that we can and should have as the city council and future administration should have as to how to use this large amount of money. So it's very simple. We can reject this proposal. I'm sure the mayor will come back with a proposal to keep in reserve of some kind, since that's what she has expressly said she wants to do. And then we can have a robust discussion, negotiation as to another way to do this. But I am not in favor of tying our hands like this for 8 years. I think it's a mistake, quite frankly. I have to add something else. We have heard, and the justification for this repeatedly was, we are going to give more money to the schools. Well, fundamentally, this doesn't necessarily do that at all. Why? Yes, there's a certain amount of money from this fund that would go to the schools every year, But the mayor could very easily, instead of allocating a 3.5% increase to the school budget, allocate a 3% increase or a 2.5% increase. There's nothing magical about 3.5% each year. We don't automatically do that. We've never automatically done that. And if you take a look at the history of school and city budgets over the last 20, 30 years, they vary in terms of what the allocation to the schools is in terms of an increase year to year. So it's a false premise in my mind. It's easy to overcome, but what this measure does, unfortunately, is it takes away all flexibility and all power from this body and locks us in. And I think that's a mistake. So please, please, please do not think that a vote against this measure is a vote against the schools. That simply is not accurate. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next is Councilor Lipoff, Vice President Lipoff.
Thank you. We have a lot of people in this city asking for more money for the schools, for infrastructure, for teachers' contracts. This money is one-time money. And and the decision here isn't the other ways we can spend it and negotiating with the mayor about how to do that. This is a plan that Maureen Lemieux and the mayor came up with that I think is quite wise. I think it's very creative. It gives 30% to the city side, 70% to the schools. That 3.5% number going to the schools is a real number. If anybody thinks we're going to give 2.5% to the schools with the ongoing contract and how most of us would like to support the schools, I don't believe that's going to happen. This allows us to push it to 3.7, and it really helps us bridge and get to that 8-year point when we are going to be at the end of paying for the pensions, and that is going to be a joyous year. This is very simple, people. We can allow the mayor to do this, to fund our schools a little bit more, to help bridge a tough next 8 years that we have in budgeting, or she can use it for infrastructure programs, for capital improvement. 26 million sounds like a lot. It goes pretty quick on a few projects, but I feel the better use is getting creative with it and doing this bridge financing. I support this, and I hope everybody else will too. And I endorse the comments that Councillor Kalis made as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Norton, you had your hand up before, but did you want to speak?
Yeah, I couldn't tell if there were more hands up in the room, so was going to listen more. So I supported this in committee, and I plan to support it tonight. And the reason is that it, to me, seemed like a non-controversial plan along the lines of what Councillor Kalis said, that will fund pay down of the pensions. And remember, at that point, we start pay down of OPEB, other post-employment benefits, the retiree healthcare. So we have a long way to go to pay down our liability. And also it funds the schools. So it doesn't have to be that this is what is done with the money, but to me, the plan seemed reasonable. I hear the argument about how it ties our hands, but we tie the hands of future councilors and mayors with many of our votes. Anytime we're spending money far into the future, we're tying the hands of the councilors and the mayors at that point. So I'm comfortable with that. The school superintendent, the new superintendent, came to our committee and spoke in favor of the proposal and shared a unanimous statement from the school committee in favor of the proposal. And to me, it reminded me of the discussion over the pension paydown rate, where there were counselors who had other ideas other than what the mayor wanted to do and had negotiated with the retirement board. And I felt like it's the executive branch's lane, not to say that we can't have opinions. And so my recommendation would be, if you don't like it, then just vote it down. But if 24 counselors all have different ideas on what, how we spend this money, you're not necessarily going to get agreement from the other counselors. You won't necessarily get agreement from the mayor. And if she doesn't agree, it's not going to happen. So to me, I would just look at this proposal. It seems very reasonable to me. I support it. But if you don't, I think it's better to just vote it down. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. I do not support approval of the Operations Booster stabilization as it's currently laid out. One is I do, like my fellow councilors have stated, want to make it very clear that I fully support more money, much more money being directed to the schools. It's critical. The cuts last year were very painful to the school committee, to the Newton Public Schools. I've heard from teachers and parents and much of those concerns. However, I don't think the plan before the council is as good as it needs to be. We have great needs now, given the level of these budget cuts and the continued effects of learning interruptions during COVID. And the basic plan, the way the plan is laid out now financially, and I put on my MBA hat and MBA in finance and looked at the payments, and we're getting 1x in the next fiscal year, 2x, then 3x, all the way to 8x. If you can sort of think about that in staffing terms, maybe it pays for 5 or 6 teachers next year, then 10 to 12 teachers, then 15 to 20, and so on. I think that it would be much better for the public schools to have a bigger commitment of that money up front, more maybe in the magnitude of 10 to 12 teachers this year, and then commit. What I keep hearing is the public schools need this money committed so that they can hire teachers and not feel like they need to lay them off. So the option that really probably should be before us is a plan that puts forward, assuming the mayor is committed and future mayors would be committed to continuing our current allocation of funding, is a plan that lays out more like, let's give NPS enough money to hire 12 teachers and keep those teachers hired for the next 8 years. That's the plan that if we really care about the schools, we should care about funding more teachers now and keeping those teachers going forward. If we have a declining school enrollment and we don't do much, we don't get very far with doing more housing, I'm not sure how 40 more teachers 8 years from now is going to do us a lot of good. We need teachers now. We need staff now. And so that is why I'm against this plan. And I'm frustrated that the mayor hasn't given the amount of opposition, the most I've seen in my 4 years on the council, to any item, especially a finance item like that, that we haven't heard more proposals. And I wasn't at the finance meeting, but, I'd love to hear other opinions about what the superintendent said. My understanding is maybe she didn't support the plan, but just supported the need for more funding. So again, I think, if we really care about funding the schools, let's have a plan that funds more teachers now, and for the next, maybe it's more like 5 years. And my second concern, just really quickly about this, is I think tying
Councillor
up...
Bowman, you need to ask for more time.
1 minute, please.
Councillor Bowman would like another minute. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you very much. I don't think I've ever had to have extra time. So I think the other piece that I'm concerned about is the tying up of this money in an investment vehicle that is invested at more of a, what would be called, considered sort of a general rate today. If in 5 years, interest rates could be much higher or much lower. If they're much higher, this was a bad plan. And if they're much lower, we'll have a lot of this development that is on hold right now should be back in swing, and we'll have more money to deal with. So I think either way, on the financing, it's not the best deal. But I'm most concerned about a plan that funds more teachers in the coming close years, not 8 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Humphrey.
Thank you. So I continue to be against this proposal, and what we keep hearing in defense of it and in support of it is one false premise after another. The situation has gotten really tunnel vision about this. I think we all pretty much want additional funds for schools, so that's not really the point in question. Part of the question is how much and when, and there are some other priorities as well besides the schools that also you have the same question of how much and when, and it's not just this money that we're looking at, and it's not just this year that we're looking at, and even the 8 years itself is more flexible than has been suggested because we always have options. We have options with the pensions, we have options with the timetable and the spending if there's leadership in that direction, which is, not the current priority, but things change. We have options if we have to find additional resources to cover a 1 or 2 year budget gap at the pinch point. We have options if we absolutely had to make cuts, but at least then voters would understand why we were making cuts in one particular year instead of little slashes every single year. This plan that's on the table is not enough money right now. It doesn't restore the positions that have been cut recently, so that's not even an argument in favor of this plan. And we need significantly more resources to the schools and to be able to get a fair contract and so forth. This plan is essentially putting some of the money into a lockbox, spreading it out very conservatively over 8 years with a lot of pessimistic assumptions about the city's future finances in a way that I think is going to make it harder to get an override passed in the future. I think that it's going to lock up this money in a way that it can't be applied toward resolving the contract dispute, which is one of our big ongoing challenges right now that we need to get resolved in a fair way. I'm not saying that there's a need to spend all of the money all in one place, all at one time, far from it, but there are many, many ways to get to fiscal responsibility and to have a fiscally responsible plan. This is not the only way of doing that, and I would argue that it is an insufficient way of doing that. I was more than willing to entertain compromises. I put forth compromises. You probably all saw the memo that I had in that direction. I would have loved to have a compromise on this, and I'm sure that we will get one after this is voted down, but this is not going to pass. This is not the right plan. This is not the only plan, and it is completely false to suggest that this is the only fiscally responsible plan or the only way to achieve these objectives. That is simply not true, and plenty of people with plenty of expertise, as much as this administration have said the same thing. I'm merely relaying that message to my colleagues. I'm not pretending that I have the expertise, but I'm saying that other people have made very clear cases, written out clearly. And finally, to the point about the school committee and the superintendent, they certainly did not articulate anything specific. It was completely generic, just that they wanted more money, which I agree with, but it was not about this plan in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Grossman.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't think I've heard anybody suggest that this is the only plan in the world that could possibly make sense. I certainly don't believe this is the only plan in the world that could make sense. It is the plan that the mayor is willing to put before us after us asking a whole lot of times what other plans she might consider. And for me, from the beginning, this has been very simple. After the health and safety of our community, my top priority is the education of our kids, period. Every budget that I have presided over, we have spent many hours and at times many nights seeking more funds for the schools. A few budget cycles ago, we rejected not only the school budget, but the entire budget over it and put ourselves in a position where we were worried about potentially legally defunding the entire school system over our consternation of how we expressed to the mayor and the public our desire to give more money to the schools to educate our kids. Last spring, when we were talking about our pension funding and we were looking at all the different percentages of what we might do, many of us, not everybody, but many of us We're really enthusiastic about the idea of reducing our appropriation below 6.6%, the growth in the appropriation, to a number closer to 5%, precisely to free up this type of stream of revenue that we could spend on the schools. At least that was my priority, not everybody's. Other folks had other funding priorities in mind. I don't deny that. But this approximates that. For those who are opposed to this because they don't feel the mayor has listened, I actually feel the mayor listened quite closely to what we were doing in the spring, and that this plan was born out of those discussions with the belief that she was trying to meet us on some of the topics that we were talking about and some of the initiatives that we were trying to be able to slow the growth in the pension appropriation and free up more money for the kids. I do believe that this plan puts our superintendent and our school hire some new people in a sustainable way to restore some of the positions, maybe not as many positions as we would all like to see, but in a way that can stand the test of time and can be ultimately matched by the financial flexibility that we expect to have in 8 years when we do finally fully fund our pension obligation. And that is why this makes so much sense to me. The last thing I will say is that I don't know how many of you looked at the MCAS results that came out a few weeks ago. I haven't looked at every single school. I've certainly looked at some that are of closer interest to my heart and my own experience. I'll give you one example. In Bigelow Middle School, this past spring, 40% of 7th graders did not meet expectations in math. 40% of our 7th graders in Bigelow Middle School did not meet expectations in math. That is not okay with me. We need to give more money to the kids. And if you're asking me, do I have any reservations about tying our hands to fund the education of our children, my answer is no. Please tie my hands and fund the education of our children. And please continue doing it through these 8 years and beyond, and give these kids what they need to equip themselves for advancement and success. So,
Councilor Grossman, you have to ask for more time.
I think I've probably made my point pretty clear, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Councilor Crossley.
What she said. Wow. So under the pretense of supporting the motion to substitute approval for denial, I guess I'll say what I had to say. I listened very carefully to the Finance Committee meetings. I often say this is not my wheelhouse, but I do understand some basic principles. I understand that we are the City Council and we have a strong mayor form of government. And I understand that this is the proposal that is being put forward to us. And I understand that if we deny this proposal, we are taking a risk. And Councilor Humphrey may be correct or may not be correct that the mayor will propose an alternative that we might like better. I say that understanding that some things that have been made clear to me in recent weeks and months and years, I suppose, that, funding the pension to 100% isn't necessarily the wisest course, that maybe when we get to 85% or so, we can slow it down. So that's another opportunity for us to go back and reconsider the proportions of spending. We take a risk if we ask to have this money spent sooner. I understand our mayor and CFO are conservative financially. That's part of what has helped to rebuild our weak financial standing that was the case when I took my seat in 2010. And has put the city on a much stronger course ahead. But if we ask now, if we take that risk and ask to, advance this money and spend it sooner, then we take the risk that we won't, as they are assuming, pass an override in the next term, or find some other way of filling that gap using one-time funds to fund ongoing expenses. I understand that that's not a good idea. I don't even want to go into what if I were in that chair, would I spend more money sooner? Maybe so, but I'm not in that chair. So I agree with Councilor Grossman that, this is an opportunity to have some ongoing funds for our schools. If the council is wise, years from now, when it comes up that we might want to divide this funding in a different way, we might want to revisit it. If the electorate elects wise people to take a closer look at that time, we have the opportunity to do so with a 2/3 vote. That might be a big assumption, but I hope that it's not. So, but as I listened to the finance meeting, what I heard more than wanting to fund more teachers sooner, which I would love to see, or even paying better salaries, which I would also love to see, and I too am nervous about the contract negotiations. But what I heard from counselors was a recognition that these are one-time funds, and wouldn't it be better for us, and I think this was in Councilor Humphrey's proposal as well, to take some of this money and spend it on improvements to the schools because it's one-time funds.
Councilor Crossley, you need to ask for more time.
1 minute, please.
Councilor Crossley would like another minute. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Please go
Thank you.
ahead.
But we may not have all of the information we need to understand whether that's necessary. Specifically, we have a lot more free cash available to us, even once this money is used for the purposes the mayor states. We have, even after the $10 million is allocated to the Lincoln Elliott School, and we keep a reasonable amount in reserve for storms and snow and so forth, we have free cash unless the bids come in on Lincoln Elliott 30% higher than what we're targeting, which is a real possibility, but we don't know, right? Because we know, as we talked about at length earlier, that construction costs are through the roof. It's a bad time to bid projects. We might see something like that, in which case I think the mayor wants to wait and see before we pull money from those funds to fix desperate needs in our schools. So I was going to propose, but we have to vote on the motion before us first. I was going to propose that we wait till October 26th and get those bids in and see where the rest of our free cash stands, because that's the biggest unknown ahead of us in the near future. I will propose that we postpone and wait for that once we vote on the motion before us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Danberg is next.
Thank you, Madam President. In 2010, we were facing a very bad structural deficit in this city. And I want to thank the Warren administration for starting to turn that around, and I want to thank the Fuller administration for furthering that and getting us onto a very good financial footing. We have been financially conservative over the past decade, and that has been what has allowed us to get to where we are. We've got $26 million plus another amount that the mayor has continued to be fiscally conservative and put toward, spread over 8 years. But which I think is certainly a good idea. But I think we could have a better outcome if we took some of that money, because it is a one-time thing, it's a one-time expenditure. Unfortunately, I would love to put it toward teacher salaries. I would love to put it toward hiring more staff. We really shouldn't do that, because one-time income needs to be spent on one-time expense. Thank you very much, Councilor Grossman, for telling us the percentage that we are behind because of in the MCAS in our children's scores. Because what this says to me is that what we need, and my first career was as a high school teacher for a dozen years, I understand what the teachers are facing and how this all works and how important it is that we address this now, not over the next 8 years, now. I would see taking a portion of this money and putting it toward programs that will help bring those children up to where they ought to be now. Let's say over a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. It took 2 years of COVID for our children to fall this far behind, and it'll probably take a few years for them to be able to get back to where they need to get to. But let's do it now, and let's take some of that money and put it toward one-time expenditure capital needs that Councilor Gentile was talking about. I agree with that. Let's fix some of the bathrooms. Let's do some things that would make the children and the teachers have a better time now. And then let's take the rest of it and do it and spread it over the 8 years the way the mayor has suggested. I think that both of these things can be done, but I don't think that it does us enough good to take all of the money and spend it over the next 8 years. We need to get these children up to snuff now, and we need to fix do some capital improvements in the schools now. So let's, good plan, yes, but it doesn't take into account what our real needs are in the schools right now. So let's split it. Let's not use all of the money at once in
Councillor
this.
Danberg, you need to ask for more time.
30 seconds, please.
Councillor Danberg would like another 30 seconds. All those in favor say aye. Please go ahead.
Let's take some of this money and put it to use where it will really do good use. It'll really help the students, and that is to get some programs to get these kids up to where they need to be, and use some money for capital expense, and then put the rest to work for 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
It's so hard to stand up without putting weight on my left foot. Boy, on this one, I have committed to myself and to everyone else to stay open-minded, and I'm glad I did, because some days I think yes, and sometimes I think no, and then I remind myself just to keep listening to everybody. I think ongoing funding is a good thing. I think it's not enough. That's not a good thing. I think it's a long period of time. Too little over time. On the other hand, I have so much respect for the way the mayor and Maureen Lemieux have handled our finances in a conservative, responsible way. I have so much respect for Becky Grossman. I'm also very swayed by Councilor Gentile tonight, who has a lot of experience with finance too. And what is coming down for me, and I've been wrestling with this because it's not so much factual, but it is my experience, is that it's a difference between the in-the-know insider who knows better than the 95% of the residents who talk to me, my neighbors who write to me, and they're almost all opposed to this. This isn't doing what they want. It's not solving an immediate need. I feel like it's a little bit out of touch with the populace. It's like the insiders versus the population. And that's where I'm having a lot of struggle with it. On all issues, we listen to everybody and we use our own judgment. I haven't seen an issue yet that I'm aware of where the huge majority of people are not in favor of doing it this way. Their parents, past, present, and future, their staff members, their teachers, their social workers, their occupational therapists. And I'm almost overwhelmed by how much negativity there is out there towards this plan of solving this problem. And that's where I'm a little bit headed by tonight, but I very much appreciate the comments of everybody else so far. And it's hard, but I think we have to be really aware of that sense of who knows better and what the majority of people feel. And that's the thing that's kind of swaying me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I spent the last couple of weeks talking to everybody on this subject, including neighbors, neighbors with children in the schools, many of the counselors with many different views, and many different views on why to vote no and different views on why to vote yes. But I finally have come up with the conclusion that I'm going to vote no. I want the money now, and I want it earmarked in the schools. I want to know what teachers are coming back. I want money for the teachers' contract. I want our teachers to get paid. And I just don't want to give it to the schools and hope they do the right thing with it. I also want money to go to the school facilities. So I'm going to be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Gentile, you have your hand up, but you've spoken already more than 5 minutes. So how much time would you like?
2.5, please. But from the time that I wasn't hoping to do this, but after the passionate plea of my finance chair, I need to do this. The clerk has a slide that I would ask her to put up.
You need to suspend the rules for additional.
Yes, I need to ask for a suspension of the rules. Double, because the rules actually say we're not allowed to speak for more than 5 minutes, which we never follow. But so Councillor Gentile would like 2.5 minutes, is that correct?
Please.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Please go ahead.
I respect the thoughts that Councilor Humphrey and Councilor Bowman had as to how to use the money, and there's some good ideas. I'm not advocating on how to spend the money in any particular way. I want to make that clear. I have said that we should put this into a reserve fund that gives us the flexibility to use it collaboratively with the mayor to support the schools and other needs. This is a slide that was prepared by the Mayor Fuller's administration. It was designed to show the support that the administration and the city have given to the schools recently. If you notice, it's one-time money of $2,390,000 and permanent money of almost $3 million. In addition to that, this mayor has consistently started off with an allocation that was 3.5% higher than the previous year. And the other point I want to make sure that everybody understands is that over the last 4 years, the school population has dropped by 1,000 students, and by the year 2027, it is projected to go down another 700 students. I am very much looking forward to the proposed school department budget from the new superintendent this spring. That's all I'll say there. The second point, it was mentioned earlier that the money could be used for infrastructure, capital improvements. I looked up the board order, and the board order talks about the establishment of an operations booster stabilization fund for the purpose of relieving pressure and to assist with the city fully funding the pension system and to support the Newton Public Schools operations. It makes no mention of being able to use these monies for capital improvements or infrastructure. So I think it's important that people, because I've heard some of you speak about the need or the desire to be able to use the funds that way. That's not the way the board order reads. Thank you. Thanks for the additional time.
Thank you. Just under. Well done. Councillor Kalis, you had your hand up. Are you still wanting to speak?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I've got a few things. So I want to address a few comments in particular. One, the first time we met on this topic, it was early September. I think the first meeting in September in finance, and we did talk then about finding some money up front to fund capital. Well, guess what? The mayor and Maureen came back to us, I think the following week, actually. It was during their plan when they proposed the plan for capital improvements. They allocated, I think it was 3 to 5 million on school infrastructure. So that was already there. If anybody remembers and can pinpoint exactly what that number is, please do. But I know that they came back to us and they answered that question and they gave us that money. So I think it's important, Councillor Danberg, Councillor Gentile, others that have said, we want money now, they've said yes to that. The second thing, Councillor Humphrey talks about, nobody is saying that this is the only plan, Councillor Humphrey. And a lot of colleagues are talking about all of the different options that we have, the option to do this, the option to do that, to spend it in this way. We can't make those decisions, okay? The mayor's making those decisions. So if we say no, we're not getting the money for the schools. And yeah, we might fund something on the municipal side, but like Councillor Gentile's talked about wanting, and that's fine. But this is something where we've been asking for money for the schools for year after year after year. And finally, there's something that's actually dedicated. So it actually covers some of those costs. And I think that's really important not to let go of. I hear when Councillor Danberg and Bowman and Ryan talk about, I don't like this plan because it doesn't do everything that we need. Well, you know what? The mayor did propose what we need. It's called the override, and it failed. So she's coming back, and she's trying to do the best she can with what she has. And to convert this into operating money, I think was, when I first saw it, I was like, wow, Maureen really did a job here. I would never have thought about doing this. And yes, I have my MBA in finance as well, but it was something so creative. And I just think it's something that we all have to think about, all of the things that they've given based on the things that we've asked for, and the things that were already rejected, that override. And they've come back for this. Now, I think those are my only points. I just think that when you think about this at its core, I think Councillor Grossman really summed it up so well. But if we reject this, there's no one to say that they're going to come back and fund any more for the schools or for teachers. I mean, this mayor has given, you're right, Councillor Gentile, 3.5% every year. This is over and above that.
Councillor Kalis, you need to ask for more time.
Ask for 30 seconds more.
Councillor Kalis would like another 30 seconds. All those in favor say aye. Please go ahead.
I just think it would be a shame to basically say no to something that isn't perfect. We all recognize that, but that is doing some good. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everyone who wanted to speak. So if we can recall what the motion is to substitute Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to get back, because I think I spoke before Councillor Grossman. Her data
Councillor
point.
Bowman, you need
sorry.
more time. You've already
Can I ask for
spoken
one minute, please?
Okay,
Very
Councillor-
quick comment.
Councillor Bowman would like another minute. All those in favor say aye. Please go ahead.
I think Councillor Grossman made a point that was really important, that I think more supported my viewpoint of more money for more teachers now, You know, we have an incredible need now. By the time this money gets big enough that we're enabling more staffing changes, those 7th graders are going to be in college, or maybe not. Maybe they'll be taking a gap year or going someplace else. And if we want to help those 7th graders, we need more people now in the middle schools, not 5 years from now. And so I think from that aspect, I just urge my colleagues, I get the mayor says she doesn't want to do more, but she does have to respond to the parents who are calling for more funding. And this is just not sufficient. And we cannot explain to residents why there's $27 million and all that we can spend next year is $500,000. And all we can spend the year after that is $1 million. And all we can spend the year after that is $1.5 million. This is not, we have critical needs now, children who are getting left behind, and it's incredibly heartbreaking. And it shouldn't be. We are a wealthy community, and I get the override didn't pass, and everyone on this council should have supported the override. That's my feeling, and that's my feeling of why it didn't pass. But this is the position we're in today. We have this money, and we should put it forward for the most critical needs. And the most critical needs are funding, teachers, and staff now to help our children return to the excellent learning the excellent learning environment that we need to deliver to them. And it's late, and I'm tired. Thanks.
Okay. The motion was to substitute approval for denial.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bowman.
No.
Counselor Crossley.
Aye.
Counselor Danber.
No.
Counselor Downs. Counselor Gentile. Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
No.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
No.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
No.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
No.
Counselor Maliki.
No.
Counselor Markowitz.
No.
Counselor Noel.
No.
Counselor Norton.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver. Counselor Ryan.
No.
Counselor Wright.
No.
President Albright.
Aye.
Motion fails, 10 yeas, 13 nays, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Crossley.
So, in the interest of taking as long as possible on every item, I just want to propose that we postpone the item for the reasons I stated before, but I'll restate. A number of people have suggested that a reason for not supporting this item is they think that some of this money should be taken and used immediately to repair things in the schools. And I couldn't agree more that things need to be repaired in the schools, but we may have sufficient free cash to make, I don't know, pick a number, $3 million, $5 million worth of very necessary repairs outside of this fund. And we won't know that until the Lincoln Elliott bids come in. Those come in October 26th. There's no real reason why we need to vote this tonight. You can see how the vote is going, but to the degree that that might help to inform some of our positions, I move postponement.
Okay, Councillor Crossley has moved postponement. Councillor Laredo.
So I must be mistaken. I thought we heard loud and clear from the mayor exactly how much free cash was available in the city. And that's been stated on numerous occasions. It's been certified by the state. We know exactly how much free cash is there. So I'm a little confused as to what my colleague from Ward 5 is referring to.
Councillor Crosley, I think you need to make the link between the October 26 bids.
So, as I said earlier, the Lincoln Elliott bids are out. We have a certain expectation of where that's going to come in, but we don't know for sure. For example, we had to postpone to rebid the New Cal project. Things are crazy out there in the construction world, materials and labor and so forth, and very uncertain. So without the certainty of where these bids might come in, we're not sure. Might we need a few million more dollars from free cash to allow Lincoln Elliott to go forward? It's just another data point.
With all respect to my colleague from Ward 5, I don't see any connection with that whatsoever. We can bond that money for New Cal if we need to, and we need to bond more. If the mayor wants to propose to make up a shortfall from nearly, what, $29 million in free cash that's completely unallocated at this point, I'm sure that just is a non-starter. And I don't think we should delay this anymore. We've sat on this for 2 months. We had extensive discussions led by the chair quite ably in the Finance Committee. I think we should vote this up or down tonight. That'll let the mayor know where we stand, and hopefully there'll be some discussion and we can try to reach some better consensus. But I would adamantly oppose postponing this. Thank you.
Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you, Madam President. I associate myself with the remarks made by Councilor Laredo, and I would further add that the mayor and her administration and her team have expressed that they would like this to be an up or down vote tonight. They, to my knowledge, have not expressed any desire to postpone it. I don't see why we would. Thank you.
Councillor Gentile.
So I too would urge us not to postpone the item. I think most everyone is aware that the stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote, 16 votes. And there were 13 people here tonight that voted against even substituting them. So you're going to have to change an awful lot of minds. I think that we would all be better served, including the mayor's office, if we were to vote this down. And to Council Crossley's point, if we're going to need some extra money for Lincoln Elliott, then we would be better served to keep all of the money that we have as liquid as possible. That means not just free cash, but the overlay surplus money. So you want to keep it liquid. Now you have $54 million, and if you have an issue with Lincoln Elliott, it'll be a lot easier to address it. So please, this proposal got an awful lot of discussion. It's been fully vetted. It's been rejected by a majority. It needs 2/3. I think we should vote it, and then let's get on with, further plans down the road.
Okay, anyone else? So the motion is to postpone. And we will take the roll.
Councillor Baker. Councillor Bowman.
No.
Councillor Crossley.
Aye.
Councillor Danberg.
No.
Councillor Downs. Councillor Gentile. No. Councillor Greenberg.
Aye.
Councillor Grossman.
Aye.
Councillor Humphrey.
No.
Councillor Kalis.
Aye.
Councillor Kelly.
No.
Councillor Krinsman.
Aye.
Councillor Laredo.
No.
Councillor Leary.
Aye.
Councillor Lipoff.
Aye.
Councillor Lucas.
No.
Councillor Malachy.
No.
Councillor Markowitz. Councillor Noel.
No.
Councillor Norton.
Aye.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Ryan.
No.
Councillor Wright.
No.
President Albright.
Aye.
Motion fails, 9 yeas, 14 nays, 1 absent.
Okay, unless anyone else has a motion, we will vote on the main item, which could somebody remind me?
So, Madam President, just so I understand, The committee report was to deny, so if you vote in favor of the committee report
That's right.
of the denial, you vote aye. If you disagree with the committee report, you vote nay. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councilor Baker. That's exactly what I needed.
Counselor Baker.
No.
Counselor Bowman.
Yes. Oh, yeah, aye, sorry.
I'm sorry, that's a yes, right?
Aye, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Crossley.
No.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs. Counselor Gentile. Counselor Greenberg.
No.
Counselor Grossman.
No.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
No.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
No.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
No.
Counselor Lipoff.
No.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz. Counselor Noel.
Aye.
Counselor Norton.
No.
Counselor Oliver. Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Albright.
No.
Motion carries 13 yeas, 10 nays, 1 absent.
Okay, I think that concludes our business. Councilor Grossman,
Motion to adjourn.
thank you very much.